Springer, right?
And we're off and running on a Tuesday, and it's beginning to look a lot like Thanksgiving. I'm up here in New York today, where everywhere I have gone, people are getting ready for the Thanksgiving Day parade. Run into a bunch of Florida fans from Orlando. Apparently a couple of high schools are going to be marching, but that is on Thursday. We are here on Tuesday, and we have a lot to share with you as we get ready for the holidays. We've been waiting for a story for several months. At one point, we thought maybe the Missouri ruling from the NCAA could perhaps help Missouri get into the SEC championship game or a major bowl. Well, that train has passed, but the ruling is in, and it's about what everyone expected. The NCAA has rejected the Missouri appeal, upholding postseason bowl ban sanctions against the football program. Missouri has yet to qualify for a bowl game, although that will happen probably on Friday. Remember, the school in 2016 admitted that a tutor violated NCAA rules by completing coursework for athletes in football, baseball, and softball. In January this year, the NCAA shockingly banned Missouri football, baseball, and softball from postseason. In March, Mizzou appealed. Today, we have the ruling, and as expected, you can pretty well guess the Missouri reaction is not going to be very pleasant. We are deeply disappointed. This is coming from the chancellor and the athletic director. We are deeply disappointed and appalled by the NCAA Infractions Appeal Committee decision to shirk its responsibility and simply uphold sanctions that are not consistent with precedent or even common sense. Today's decision raises serious questions about whether the current NCAA enforcement system encourages or discourages cultures of compliance and integrity. While we have exhausted our appeal avenues, we will continue to advocate for meaningful reform within the NCAA enforcement process. The commissioner of the NCAA, who has served as the enforcement committee chairman, said throughout this process, the University of Missouri has conducted itself with great integrity and has been praised by the NCAA Division I Committee on Infractions for its exemplary cooperation in this matter. While there is no excuse for the actions of a single academic tutor and the small number of student athletes involved, the penalties applied here are unusually severe when fully considered. So certainly different reactions there. I will tell you, I've covered NCAA procedures for my entire career. I started as an investigative reporter. I do not remember a statement as punishing as the one that I just read from the chancellor and the athletic director at the University of Missouri. It is, I almost said something that would have got me in trouble. It is a bruising statement. I almost went below the belt with my description. But anyway, let's move on from there. We have a big show on tap for you today, and Pat Dooley covers the Gators. Gators are kind of that forgotten team. They're still alive as they play FSU this weekend. Seth Walder, he'll tell us about Alabama's chances and everyone else's. John Talty from AL.com wrote a brilliant piece the other day about the future of television for the SEC, especially that 3:30 window. Ross Dellinger, formerly of Baton Rouge, used to cover LSU. Now he covers college football for SI. And Lynn Bowden Jr., the all-everything Kentucky quarterback. He was once a wide receiver. Now he's just a star. Let's get to your phone calls at 855-242-7285. And we start with Dan in Louisiana. Hello, Dan.
Paul, I'm just thinking ahead, or thinking about the playoffs and the storylines that will be if Alabama gets in ahead of Georgia, and it's Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU. And I know right now that Alabama's pulling for LSU, and I also know that the only way LSU is going to rise is if Alabama falls. And I'm just thinking to myself how strange that is. I was just wondering your thoughts about it and about the storylines. Ohio State, Joe Burrow from Ohio, might play Ohio State in the championship game, and then LSU might play Alabama for
Yeah,
for a spot in the championship.
Dan, listen, I mean, I can't act like I haven't thought about it. I think Burrow versus his old school would be a really fascinating storyline. The Alabama LSU game, I haven't really focused on much yet because I still think there are a lot of moving parts, and we're talking about a game that would be about a month off. It's not that far away because this is a very late end to the regular season. It seems like the schedule is about a week later than it was a year ago. I don't know. I'm not really excited to see Alabama and LSU play again. We saw that game repeated in 2011, and it was a completely different game. And in some ways, I just don't think it's fair to LSU to have to go into Tuscaloosa, win that game, and then win the SEC championship, and then still have to play Alabama again.
Really? Well, they've been champions for a decade or right up there, and they might have to be beat twice to seal the deal.
I mean, Alabama, Nick Saban it's kind of like the old adage. Remember, our parents told us, be careful what you wish for.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Dan. Good to have you on. Do appreciate it. Alan is in New York. Hello, Alan. Nice of you to call.
Hey, Paul. Good to talk to you. I'm in the East Village. I think I'm actually pretty close to where you're filming.
Yeah, no, we're down in we're in the shadows of the Brooklyn Bridge, so I could probably throw a football over and hit you.
Very cool. Yeah, there's a lot of great live music and stuff around there. Welcome to the city once
Thank
again.
you.
I wanted to talk about Tua's injury. I know it's been talked about a lot, but it really hit me hard. I know you get this because you're passionate about sports, but sometimes sports is about more than sports. And my dad and I were at the national title game where Tua completed 2nd and 26, and it was one of the most magical moments I've ever seen. It was a really special thing. It almost seemed, divine watching it happen. And then to see the hero of that night in the fetal position and screaming was pretty tough. And I wanted to ask your thoughts on the morality of football when you see something like that, because, I have a libertarian side and I love sports, and I played ice hockey, and I think, people know what they're getting into, and I think that's cool, but sometimes I feel pretty squeamish about it, and that it's something kind of like smoking cigarettes where we're going to look back later and say, why did we support this? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Alan, I think you raised some fair points, and I have to tell you, the injury affected all of us in ways that I don't think I can quite enunciate, and I think part of it had to do with for at least the first few minutes, maybe even longer. It looked like his career was over. That was it, and I think as the story made its way to the second and third day, we realized it was not as severe as originally feared. But one thing I do know, and I know this not because I played the game, but I've been down as close to the action as you can get without having played, and I have many, many friends who did play college football and especially professional football, and the reality is it's a brutal sport, and there's no getting around it. That's what is taught, and I think that's what makes it so popular as well. I mean, remember, if you go back to ancient history, you had 50 or 100,000 people watching gladiators fight. And
they sure did.
It seems rather barbaric now, but I bet you could draw a pretty good crowd if you reenacted it. So
it's a beautiful sport.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to let it. I think unless you see it up close, you just you block it out. But I will tell you, and from where I sit, I mean, you run into a lot of players who I'm thinking of one in particular that I ran into a couple of years ago, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he was an elite player, and he was injured in a play that was similar to Tua's. He shouldn't have been in the game. The game was out of reach, and his entire career was destroyed because of that. And that is very sad to me, and I think to many other people as well.
It was so fast. That was one of the things that was shocking, and it didn't really hit me until late that night. And I thought, Tua's gone. Just like that. He's not going to put on the crimson again. It was really shocking. But thanks for taking the call. I love football. It's a part of my family tradition, and I don't think I can give it up. But I think it's
Alan. Let me say one more thing, and I don't mean this. Everybody who plays football understands the risk, and I don't mean that to paint a broad brush or a negative brush. And they're good with it. They are warriors, and they take on, and many would not change a thing. But I deeply appreciate your call, and we hope you have a great holiday. We are heading to our first break of the day. We have a lot to do here on this Tuesday afternoon, one of the great weeks of the year. The holiday season is here, and everywhere you go, people are unusually. Welcome back. We're glad you're here, and what a show we have in store for you on this Tuesday. Let's talk to Greg first up on the horn. Hello, Greg.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank
As
you.
we're getting ready for the Iron Bowl, it made me think about the first one that was played in '89 down in Auburn, and how, when Bear Bryant was still coaching, he had told a young Pat Dye that game wasn't ever leaving as long as he had anything to do with it. And then all of the negotiations and work that Pat had to do to pull that off, when a lot of people that weren't associated with Auburn University didn't want that game to move.
No, I listen, Greg, as a moderately young reporter covering that story, I remember the day that Pat Dye announced in the mid-'80s that he was moving the game out of Legion Field, and a lot of people, especially Alabama fans who thought it was their birthright to play at Legion Field, reacted about as angrily as I've ever seen anything. By the time the game was staged in late November of 1989, it was one of the shrewdest moves that Dye ever made.
Yeah, and I remember we had just come off deployment, and we were back in Charleston, and that game was on TV, and it just felt different watching it in that stadium, because it hadn't been there in my lifetime, and so I think it was one of the things that led to Steve Sloan's resignation and why they split up the AD position from the head coach and all that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it also, I can't remember the time span when the game was agreed upon. What they did was they agreed to play, for those who don't know what we're talking about, for many, many years, for most of the existence of the modern era, the Alabama-Auburn game was played at Legion Field in Birmingham in the shadows of the University of Alabama. It was clearly an Alabama home game. There were more Alabama fans there than Auburn fans. And they made it, I can't remember the year, but they finally made an agreement to move it to Auburn. And in 1989, the game was played there. I believe the 91 game came back to Legion Field as a compromise. And then beginning in 93, it stayed in Auburn forever.
Yeah, that is actually true. And, when they made this agreement, the stadium there at Legion Field was far larger than either stadium of the universities at that time. And then by the late 70s, early 80s, they had Auburn Stadium had eclipsed the seating capacity of Legion Field, and I believe Alabama played its last ball game there in 2003.
Yeah, and for those who don't realize, Alabama played some games at Bryant-Denny Stadium, but the big games, the Tennessee game, the LSU game, and the Auburn game were like a Notre Dame game. Those games were always played at Legion Field, which had a listen. The old story goes. You may have heard this, Greg. Well, the university president at Auburn was seated in some boxes. It was Auburn's home game. They swapped every year, and the usher was wearing an Alabama, like a Roll Tide big button, and he knew then that it was time to get out of there because everybody there was connected to Alabama. Birmingham has always been an Alabama town.
Yeah, even the popcorn salesmen and ticket takers all wore Alabama gear at that stadium, and Bear Bryant had his own parking space there. And one time, Coach Dow was going up there to park, and someone told him to go park on the other side. Called him Auburn boy, and I was there for Bear Bryant's last one right before I went into the Navy, and it was a loss, but it was an electric atmosphere there at Legion Field.
No, listen, I didn't think it could ever be replicated, but Greg, I'll never forget. If you asked me the most amazing thing I've ever seen at a college football game, it wasn't something that happened during a game. It was the hour and a half before the 1989 Auburn-Alabama game, the Iron Bowl. The Auburn fans started cheering at least an hour and a half before, and I've never heard it. I mean, they never stopped until the end of the game. It was just truly remarkable. And that game, that Auburn team had lost a couple of games. It beat an undefeated Alabama team coached by Bill Curry that was ranked number 2 in the country. And that's the only way it could have ever been, winning that first game down there. Appreciate the call very much. Rory is in Pennsylvania. Rory, you're on the air. Go right ahead.
Hey, Paul.
Hi there.
Thanks for taking my call.
You got
How
it.
you feeling? You feeling better?
Yeah, I am. I appreciate you asking. Thank you so much.
Good. Got to have your wife write you in an antibiotic.
Yeah,
Sorry, Paul. I was just calling to talk to you about Alabama and your ranking of Georgia above Alabama, and I was watching Stephen A. today, and they were all basically writing Alabama off. And I was just curious to know, after that, you got to go with common factors of the teams that all these teams play because they don't play enough games, so the sample size is small. And obviously the common team is Texas A&M. So seeing as Alabama played Texas A&M and Georgia played Texas A&M, and Georgia won that game, but it was a questionable call at the end on that hold that may have given A&M a chance to pull that out. Just curious to know what your thought is on that and just why you had Georgia ranked up above Alabama.
You know something? I was actually talking to Stephen A. on his radio show about 30 minutes ago about the very same topic, and I think it's a healthy debate whether Alabama should be ranked ahead of Georgia. Now, I didn't do it, but I could. And part of the reason I didn't do it is I just don't think it matters right now. Georgia is one of these teams that it's either going to win and be in or it's going to lose and be out. It's irrelevant. But your point is good. I mean, the Texas A&M and South Carolina games would favor Alabama in both cases. But I'm really anxious to hear what Rob Mullins says tonight. If that question is asked, did you consider putting Alabama over Georgia? I think it's a fair question. Thank you for the call. Great to have you on. John is in Baton Rouge, and you are on the air. Hello, John.
Hey, Paul. I talked to you right before the Alabama-LSU game. You might remember I was bringing up about how weak LSU's defense has been. And,
right.
I don't know. I just for so long, their offense was just terrible, and the defense was just so good. And what I can't understand, Dave Aranda, he's been just great at LSU, and but whose defensive coordinator is going to, with less than 2 minutes to go in the game, and Alabama's got the ball on their own 15-yard line with less than 2 minutes to go, and who is going to let their defensive backs let a receiver run around them to catch a 85-yard touchdown pass? I mean, I'd have told them to tackle the receivers before they ran around me. It's only a 15-yard penalty. And another thing,
listen, I want to say that, John, I am going to withhold judgment until this year is over because I do think Aranda is dealing with something he's never had to deal with before, and that's an offense that scores before you can blink an eye.
Yeah.
That's not really an excuse, but I do think he's dealing with a different factor than he's ever had to deal with before.
Yeah, they score so quickly that the defense doesn't have time to rest. I realize that. But we're not getting any pressure on the quarterbacks. We seldom ever blitz. Caleb Chason, defensive end, he'll come in there and maybe get a hand on the quarterback, but he's completely out of control, and he hardly ever makes the tackle for a sack. But he does get a hand on him. And then, of course, Michael Divinity, he was pretty good at rushing quarterback, and he left the team. I still don't know why. Nobody's really said anything. And
Yeah,
Just
listen,
do the
I
thing
think,
right.
John, I think there's some extenuating circumstances, and I was talking to somebody the other day, and this will be proven out one way or the other, but sometimes players, they get late in the year and they start trailing off. They start thinking about other things. Divinity, I think there is a very specific reason why he departed at the time he did. Listen, thanks for the call. We're up against the break. Pat Dooley covers the Gators. We'll talk about the SEC's forgotten.
Ready to go. Rivalry games, fun to be a part of. Exciting week. Obviously, a slightly different schedule this week. One, you're coming off a bye week. Two, there's no school. After Tuesday, no school Wednesday, Thursday. We'll just try to make sure I've always done this to make sure our guys have the opportunity to go spend some family time at Thanksgiving. So we'll practice early Thursday and wrap things up early, so guys can get home if they want to. For Thanksgiving. Overall, I think we're pretty healthy. We had a lot of sick guys last week. Nobody injured, but a lot of sick guys, a lot of puking and other stuff that happens when you're sick. So had some guys miss a little bit of practice last week, but overall pretty healthy from guys that have been out. Expect Bernie's got a chance to come and play this week. They said he's way ahead of schedule, so he'll be able to do some stuff today. So that would be a positive to get Amari Bernie back for the game. Zuniga's been cleared to go, so he should be practicing good to go today. To have him back for the game, and everybody else should be pretty healthy. Unless I'm missing somebody that you guys want to know about, you can let me know.
As a play caller, how challenging is it when you don't have a consistent conventional running game?
It's pretty easy. Just call other plays. You guys hear me? There's so many plays and so little time. We're still probably, I think, we have a whole list of every play that's been in all the game plans this year. And we could go, if I just called plays that we had in game plans and haven't run this year, could probably get through 2 to 3 games with those plays. So it's pretty easy. I do love to win. I've never thought of it that way, to be honest with you. I'm focused on winning this game. And I'm focused on winning this game because it is a rivalry game. Last game of the regular season, I want to get a win, and because I want to have that great taste in my mouth. There's a lot you want to win. You want to send the seniors out the right way. You want to finish with 10 wins in the regular season. You want to get to a great bowl game. You want to be undefeated in the swamp. All of those to me motivate you. Most of all, that motivates you, if anybody, I would say that most, that when we show up here on Saturday, they're going to light up the scoreboard and they're going to keep score. All those other things are awesome, but I don't need. As a competitor, that's all the motivation you need. That they're just going to keep scoring the game. I don't need anything even beyond that. It's certainly the taste in your mouth effect is huge of winning this game. You want to finish off the year with a win.
Welcome back as we continue here. It is Tuesday afternoon, and how about them Gators? They play FSU. There was a time when this was arguably the premier game of the year in college football, but things have changed on both sides. Can you believe that Gators have not defeated FSU at home since 2009? They have been destroyed by FSU. That is unlikely to happen this week. It is the 7:30 game on the SEC Network. Pat Dooley joining us, our good friend from down in Gainesville. Pat, I don't know where to start because, most of the problems with this game lately has been on the Gators side, but the Seminoles have taken over the lackluster part of the series. Good afternoon, and what's this game mean this year?
Well, it means a lot for a lot of reasons. I think more to Florida than Florida State because, Florida State's probably going to get a new coach next week. They're going to start over. But for Florida, it means getting to 10 wins, which was one more win you had the regular season last year. And it means you're showing progress, and it also means you're going to get to a nicer bowl. But it also allows you – let's face it, Paul, you saw the Miami game Saturday. And Miami and FSU are both in the toilet right now. Why not keep your foot on their throat, and win this game, win the state championship, and say, hey, there's only one team that's recruiting-wise, there's only one team that's
been in New Year's Six bowls. The other ones are hoping to get to Shreveport or whatever, So that makes it a huge game for Florida and for these seniors as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it just seemed not much has gone right in that state. I'm interested, Pat, beyond this game, because I think we all know what's going to happen. Just your thoughts on the Gator season, because I mean, all these college football playoff conversations, and I tried to explain to somebody up here today, I think it was Stephen A. Smith. I said, hey, I was talking about Auburn and saying this is really a good team. I mean, they lost at Florida. He looked at me like okay, what does that mean? And I explained Florida's resume, and it just doesn't seem like anyone wants to listen that the Gators probably, with somebody else's schedule, would be in great shape right now.
First of all, why were you discussing college football with Stephen A. Smith? Okay,
that's a good question.
That's the A part of that. The B part of it is, it has been a nice season. It has been a fun season in a lot of ways. But again, when you lose to Georgia and don't win the East, it's not a great season. On the other hand, when Jim McElwain won the East, it wasn't a great season because they always lost to FSU at the end of the year and then got, boat raced by Alabama. So, I think this has been a really nice another step. And I want to say a baby step. Last year was a big stride in getting things where they wanted to get them, and now they've taken another nice step. They need to finish it off by beating FSU to get to 10 wins. But look who they've lost to. They lost to LSU and Georgia, who are 1-4, and I assume will be 1-4 tonight in the college football playoff. So, and the other thing is going back, to what you were talking about. They haven't won since 2009. I made this point to some of the writers yesterday who I knew were writing a story, and I don't blame them. It's a sexy story in this part of the woods. But the guys who are true seniors on this team who've been here for 4 years, they've only played them at home once, and that was with an interim coach. So I don't think they're to be held responsible for what Florida's done over the last 10 years.
No, really good point. Pat Dooley joining us. Pat, I want to talk about the East and forgetting this season, but in looking ahead, in terms of the window opening, obviously the competition's always with Georgia. Here comes Tennessee. Let me start with Georgia. What's the Florida view of the Dogs right now?
I think Florida fans felt like after that game, Georgia wasn't that much better than Florida, but they were better. They were a little better, and they were better where it mattered in the line of scrimmage. And I think they felt like they're making progress, but they're not there yet. They haven't caught them. Forget the 5 stars or 4 stars, all that stuff, but they need to beat Georgia. It's important for Florida right now. I felt like last year the most important game was the Florida State game because they had won in I think 5 or 6 years. But this year, now there's no question that Georgia's the most important game. They've got to figure out a way to beat those guys, and they came closer than they did last year. But you can't allow 12 first downs, third down conversions against a team like that. And I don't think Georgia's obviously their defense is ridiculous what they've been able to do, but I don't think they're a dominant team, and you saw that Saturday against Texas A&M. But the other thing, here's what you're going to have. And, Paul, I know you're ready for Atlanta for July SEC Media Days. You have thought about that.
I didn't realize that.
Right? But here's what you're going to get there. Tennessee is going to be the new Missouri. Like Missouri last year, everybody's like, I don't know, Missouri might win that division. Missouri's going to go. Yeah, well done. 5-6, and now obviously they got bad news today, so they're not going to be bowl eligible. Even after being
now, Pat Dooley, are you not buying the resurgence of Tennessee football? I mean, come on.
Well, look, I used to call them the Kardashians, right? Because they looked good, but they never did anything. Then I started calling them Uncle Rico. Like Uncle Rico because they always want to go back to the past. They're always out in the field throwing the ball again, for the camera. But they weren't good. I give him credit for what he's done, Jeremy Pruitt. He's done a really good job in the back half of the season. But who they beaten? That's what I look at. They have still not beaten really any good teams. And next year they play Oklahoma in week 2. And obviously they get Florida early, and then they got Georgia in the back end of their schedule where it's usually soft. So it'll be interesting. I don't begrudge what he's done. I think he's probably done as good a coaching job as anybody's done there in a while in terms of winning games that you're supposed to win. Now, the problem for him is he didn't win the games he was supposed to win early. He lost to Georgia State and lost to a bad BYU team. So he's got to figure that part of it out, too.
Well, Pat, I know I'm surprised you have not been called by the University of Tennessee to be honored with some award with all the kind words that you have said. But I've quoted you countless times on the Kardashians. Yeah, they did beat. They did find Derek Dooley beatable. Well, listen, I guess I will not recommend you for the commencement speaker this year at the University of Tennessee.
That's okay. I'll be all right.
You would be a good one, though.
But look, Paul, this is a instant gratification society, and if you're not good for a long time, I mean, people are going to get down on you really hard, and that's what we're dealing with down here, where Florida was, and Florida was in a terrible pit. There's no question about it. Now, Miami and FSU are in that pit, and we'll see what FSU does to dig out of it next week.
Great to have you on, Pat. Always enjoyable. Thank you very much. We will talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. See you later.
Pat Dooley, who once called Tennessee football the Kardashians, and seems like he's doubled down on them. I think he'll be a quote machine for Knoxville Sports Radio in the morning. We'll take a break. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285.
Clemson week, kickoff here at noon, Williams-Brice Stadium. Obviously honored to be a part of one of the great rivalries in college football. Very important to our state and important to the University of South Carolina. And we had a good practice this morning. Guys bouncing around. They feel that vibe during this week, and we're looking forward to it. They got a good football team led on offense by Trevor Lawrence. He's completing right at 70% of his passes. A guy that can obviously hurt you with his legs. He's a really good athlete. They use some of the zone read and some of the designed quarterback runs, but elite arm talent, can make all the throws. Just really impressed watching him, and a really competitive guy when you turn the tape on. Injury-wise going in the game, Brian Edwards is questionable. He did a little bit today. He had a scope last week, so we'll see how he continues to progress. Obviously, he's a guy that's not going to need a lot of snaps, and that such, but we'll see how that continues to progress. Kobe Smith still got a little bit of an ankle from the A&M game. Didn't do a lot today. We're going to see what he can do tomorrow, and other than that, we should be good to go for the game, and I'll open up for any questions. Very similar to Auburn, Alabama. In that state, there's no pro teams. You're either South Carolina or Clemson in this state for the most part, and very similar to that state, and it means a lot.
I think you mentioned on your call-in show last week you were toying with maybe a new offensive line group out there. Have you settled on the starting five that you're going to put out there this week?
Colin, not as right at this time, but Ja'Kai Moore is a guy that we've been really impressed with at right tackle, and moving Dylan to left tackle, and then Sedarius to left guard. But still, having Jordan Rhodes at left guard, Sedarius at left tackle, and Dylan at right tackle as well. So we'll go with one of those groups and probably play both of those combinations in the game. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is by far Clemson's greatest stretch of football in their history. Mm-hmm. What's it like to have to be the head coach of the rival when your tenure exactly coincides with that?
I worry and spend a lot of time on South Carolina, Gene, and at the end of the day, I can't control, and I always talk to our players about control the things you can control. And as far as recruiting, as far as developing players on campus, coaching, those things I can control here, and I can't control the other. Obviously, we need to do a better job as coaches and players in this game than we have in the previous three, and find a way to win the game.
Couple of questions for you. During this open week, did you have a chance to sit down with Jake Bentley and talk about any future plans with him?
No, we won't do it after the Clemson game.
Welcome back. We are glad you're here on what's been a pretty active day so far. Glad to have all of you on board. More phone calls at 855-242-7285. 285. Danny is up next. Hello, Danny. You're on the air.
Yes, sir, Mr. Paul. Let me start out by saying I love your show.
Thank you.
And yes, sir. And the reason I think Nick Saban is saying that's going to be the toughest game they play this year is because 2 or 3 reasons. You know, they're going to Auburn in a hostile environment without the starting quarterback and with a pretty good defense, and it's hard to win in Auburn.
Well, listen, I mean, the line that Saban said that upset everyone or upset some people was that he said this is probably the best team we've played this year. I don't think, listen, you don't have to explain to Nick Saban who LSU is. He said that because he is trying to turn the page and he's trying to butter up his opponent. He's trying to make this game into an end-all, be-all. It is the most difficult road game they've had. Of course, that's not saying very much considering the road games have been at Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. But you know, he said that purposely. He was reading from a statement there. Nick Saban never says anything he has not thought through.
Oh, yes, sir. And like you said, you know, he was just trying to get a message out to his players and everybody too. And it's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I've sat here. I've been in New York all morning since the wee hours listening to pundits overreact to what Nick Saban said, including, can't remember who it was, maybe it was Marcus Spears, somebody else saying, I don't know why Nick Saban is lying. Nick Saban is not lying. Nick Saban is just having some fun. You see it every day in politics. I mean, well, in politics there's a lot more lying going on. Mike is up next in Macon, Georgia. Hey, Mike.
Thanks, Paul. I probably am going on, I hope, but thank you for taking my call. Paul,
Thank you.
After for us dog fans, we've enjoyed the very tactful commentary the last 2 ball games from Mr. Gary Danielson, and I've enjoyed that. And I think we're all really excited about Dan Orlovsky, coming on to call our game on Saturday against Georgia Tech. I heard him in that segment with you a few weeks ago saying that Georgia was done. And L didn't seem to take to it too well, and you stayed pretty neutral. But I know he's like one of y'all's budding young
Yeah, Mike.
stars.
By the way, when he said that, we have, for those who don't know the backstory on what we do up here, the show comes on at 8. We have a meeting at 6. I don't know why it's so early, but I'll leave that to somebody else. And we were going around the table after the South Carolina game, and Greenberg said, Dan, you did the game. What's your opinion on Georgia? He said, Georgia is done. They're dead. And he came to me, and I said, I don't really buy that. I watched this before, and I think they'll come back. And Orlovsky about came out of his chair, and I saw him today. I said, what game do you got this weekend? He goes, going to Atlanta. I said, he's going to, and I said, well, you're going to be well received, Dan. And listen, that's an opinion. We live in a hot take universe, Mike, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person. I have buried and given Jim Harbaugh last rites about 10 times, and I'll do it again Saturday if they lose.
Well, I'm not knocking Dan. I mean, he's actually a pleasurable guy to listen to. I mean, when he made those comments, I actually went on and researched his career, and I saw that his most famous moment as a quarterback was the first time he ever started, and he wasn't chased out of the end zone for a safety, but just inadvertently ran out of the end zone for a safety, which pretty much finished his chances as being a starter. And so,
listen, I give him credit.
He ought to be an expert on it.
I got in trouble last year. I was on Get Up with Greenberg, and Orlovsky the day before had said that Tua is going to be the LeBron of college football. And I said, I think that's a bit ridiculous. And besides, until yesterday, I'd never heard of Dan Orlovsky, and I don't even know how to pronounce his name. And and the truth of the matter is, I didn't know who he was. And just to show you the way ESPN can work sometimes, one of the producers, texted me and said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Well, I was just being funny." He said, "You need to call Dan and apologize." So listen, I didn't. So I called Orlovsky. I had never met him before, never talked to him, and he just started laughing. I said, "Dan, I just don't want you to." I mean, nothing. He said, "No, listen, it was hilarious, and we have become good friends ever since."
Well, I've got nothing against him, Paul. I just
he's one of the best analysts I've ever heard at breaking things down in a way where it is simplistic and there's always a hot take in every statement, which means one thing: he spends all night working on it.
Well, he's good at it. I mean, I'll give him that, and I'm going to enjoy listening to him, do the commentary. Paul, if you have time, can I just say one thing about I heard on your previous guest, Mr. Dooley from Florida, talking about next year, and this year is almost done. Can I say one thing about next year?
Yes.
I was looking at Texas A&M's schedule for next year. As bad as that schedule has been this year, I was looking at their schedule next year, and they should be 6-0 when they face Auburn in mid.
Oh yeah, they have a great schedule
of next year. If they win that game and Danny Sheridan assures us that Auburn will be mediocre next year, they should be 10-0 when they go into the last two games of the season next year. So there ought to be a lot of optimism, I think.
It needs to be because they have a bunch of cream puffs on their non-conference schedule. No more Clemson, so Jimbo has a chance to earn his $75 million. We'll tell you who's going to be in the playoff in a moment with Seth. Arrived, and what a week this is. Everyone loves Thanksgiving week because it is a couple of days off, and it's also great football, and we have plenty of that this weekend. And let's get right to it as we begin the last week of the regular season.
This one simply says, Texas is terrible. Low-hanging fruit or truth?
That's 100% true. Yeah. I mean, dumpster fire is used too often. I don't think it is a dumpster fire. I just think it's sad that Texas is still Texas, which is not impressive.
Can we just say they're backwards?
I think it's better for Tennessee, rather than to have, a couple of those top 25 victories, to beat all the teams in the SEC East that you're trying to pass to at least, get yourself into the top tier.
That's why I asked you, have you been to a doctor? Because I think you really need to go see a doctor other than your wife.
The most important thing, I've had the support of my bosses here at ESPN, and that's all that matters to me.
You have an unranked opponent who scores on you on 8 consecutive possessions.
No. I wouldn't let Oklahoma within 100 miles of the college football playoff this year.
Everyone's worried about LSU, to be honest. And it is actually interesting that the focus just goes completely past Georgia Tech, not just because it's a rivalry game, not just because it's on the road, but because with Georgia's offensive troubles, if Georgia doesn't fix those offensive troubles, the game could be close for a while.
There's no excuse for Bama's schedule. They could be in a better situation if they were a better team. But I just don't see Bama being in the number 4 spot tonight. I think, or tomorrow night, I think the polls stay the same.
And this, you're not going to believe, Todd Grantham. That guy should have been a head coach a long time ago.
I think even with Mac, Bama is better than Georgia.
Hey, man, I'm just tired of the Big 12 not getting any respect, man.
Well, I'm a big LSU fan, and that's part of it, Paul.
Well, it's been a great year then.
Yes, sir.
It's the day before Thanksgiving. We're live in New York today. I am being fitted for the float in the Macy's Thanksgiving parade. I'll be fitted for the balloon later today. Let's get to the question du jour. We're 3 hours before the college football playoff reveal. Most people think they know what's going to happen, but the question I've been getting for a couple of days now, and many are asking, if everything happens according to plan, which it rarely does, would Alabama get in over Utah? Many of the so-called experts have put Utah in there, probably because they hate Alabama. But let's find out what really is going on. Seth Walder joining us from ESPN Analytics. Seth, if you listen to some of the national media, the pundits, those who make a living with hot takes, certainly not, don't look at me, you would think Alabama is dead and gone, but something tells me you are going to give us a different story. What's the deal on Alabama?
Paul, I don't really see how you could say that Alabama is out of this thing. At this point, look, I think that our number, which we admit, it says not consider Tua's injury explicitly. So we probably are overrating Alabama. The scenario you laid out where everybody kind of wins out, we put Alabama at about 75%. That, even if that's high, ultimately you're going to have Alabama against Utah. Alabama's going to have a resume case. There is a 19% chance a top 25 team could go 11-1 with Alabama's schedule. There is a 32% chance that that same team could go 12-1 with Utah. So Alabama, what they've done is more impressive. At the top of the schedule, they have LSU and Auburn. Those two are. It's going to be at Auburn. Those two are both better games than what would be Utah's toughest game, which would be Oregon on a neutral field.
I think it was Tim Brando who was on here the other day talking up at Utah. And listen, I'm not here to disparage Utah. I think they have a really good coach and a really good team. But as you get inside the numbers there, help us better understand why the predictor seems to favor Alabama so much more than Utah.
Well, part of it is how good we think Alabama is, and a little bit of that is going to still be residual effect of Utah. But what Alabama's accomplished, I think, is the key thing. To me, the thing that really that I don't really get is people talk about two things with injuries regarding these two teams. So number one, the committee's always saying it doesn't project, and yet in order to keep Alabama out in this situation, I think what you have to do is you are projecting Alabama to be a different team with Mac Jones, and ultimately people are going to judge Mac Jones on a single game, the Iron Bowl really, and so that is a projection. The bigger point I want to make is that Rob Mullins mentioned last week Zach Moss missed the game against USC, or missed a lot of that game, and the game, of course, that Utah lost. You can't, A, say that without mentioning the fact that Keaton Slovis missed most of that game, and B, I sure hope the committee's thinking about every time a weak side linebacker's out or a slot corner's out, because if you open the door to running back injuries, you better consider all 22 guys on the field in every single game.
Seth, on that front, let's try to figure out the Mac Jones effect. I know the committee can't, but all eyes will be on him against Auburn. Is it just about Alabama winning this game?
I think it ought to be. Certainly a blowout would help their case. No one's going to dispute that, because it would show them what they can do. Of course, it's a single game. I mean, how long have we watched college football and known that anything can happen in a single game? So if Alabama only narrowly beats Auburn, on the road, by the way, are we really to say that this team is not good enough to get into the playoff? I certainly think that a blowout loss would help their case, but I still believe that Alabama could get in, and the playoff predictor definitely thinks Alabama could get in, even with a sort of close loss at Auburn.
Let's talk about Georgia for a moment. We feel pretty comfortable in stating that Georgia loses, they are gone. But what if Georgia wins? We think that affects Alabama. Are we correct?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if Georgia wins, I think that sets up basically the easiest scenario that you can have. Georgia would be in, LSU would probably be in, and then Clemson and Ohio State, presuming they win out. That's a straightforward case. I think people might be even sleeping on this scenario a little bit. I was surprised when I saw our number of Georgia versus LSU in the SEC championship game. We make that a 52-48 game for LSU, so that's really close. LSU has the offensive advantage, but Georgia's defensive advantage, I should say, is almost as strong. And then you add in the fact that this game will be played in Atlanta. That's something FPI considers. It's a neutral-ish game, but not completely neutral. And Georgia is almost a coin flip to win that game. So that is a game that could absolutely make this thing a real easy slam dunk decision for the committee.
I try to be objective and neutral, but every time, Seth, somebody brings up Oklahoma, it does irritate me, because I don't get it. I don't see how you could look at Oklahoma, watch them play, and think they belong in the Final Four. Where is the computer on the committee projection?
Paul, you're in line with the computer on this one, because firstly, they haven't been as good, like you said, and secondly, they haven't beaten enough in terms of quality to really earn that sort of discussion. I think there is kind of a scenario where you could put them in, but it's very specific. I mean, you think about Alabama losing the Iron Bowl. If LSU were to win out, and then maybe Utah loses, yeah, okay, maybe you get to that situation where they can be the only other one-loss team that you would really think about. But that's a very specific scenario. I do not think Oklahoma's going to get in. Ultimately, we give them a 12% chance. Their resume, by the way, is a little bit worse than Utah's by our measure. So 12% chance for Oklahoma. I would not bank on that.
I told one of the better-known, maybe the best-known ESPN personality today that the Ohio State-Michigan game really doesn't matter, especially if Ohio State loses and it's, something south of 49-0. Was I right in making that point?
You were right, as long as Ohio State doesn't lose to Michigan and then lose again. That would be the only way that this thing could matter. Actually, we took a look, and ultimately, it really doesn't matter. Ohio State needs to win one of its next 2 games. Which one probably doesn't? This one, the Michigan game, is probably the most insignificant. They lose this one, go on, win the Big Ten championship. They are a 100% slam dunk, put them in the playoff. The other way around, it's almost certain. We still think it's very likely, even in the worst case scenario where Ohio State were to beat Michigan, then lose to Minnesota, we would still say 80% chance the Buckeyes get in.
There's another game that's interesting. We just heard Will Muschamp talk about being on the wrong side of this rivalry right now, but South Carolina did beat Georgia, so I guess there's a chance at home they could beat Clemson. What happens if Clemson loses?
Clemson is in trouble if it loses. Now, I think you and I both are equally skeptical of the chance of that actually happening, but you never know. We would have been pretty skeptical before that Georgia game, too. I think if Clemson loses at 12-1, even if they go on and win the ACC championship, their schedule is so easy that you really would have a hard time justifying putting them in the playoff predictors' estimation. I gave you those numbers earlier on Alabama and Utah. If Clemson goes 12-1, an average top 25 team would have a 55% chance to have gone 12-1 against their schedule. That's how easy it is that you would just expect that, bet more likely than not. So we do think that Clemson would not deserve to get in if it were to lose any game.
And finally, what about this Minnesota-Wisconsin game? Game day thought it was pretty important. It's going to be an entertaining game, but what's the significance of the impact on the rankings?
Ultimately, Minnesota is still in this thing. I think it's a real long shot because of what they have to do, and we just don't think that Minnesota is that great of a team. They're 17th in FPI. If they were to beat Wisconsin and beat Ohio State, we make them about a 50-50, 48% chance to get in. The reason why that number isn't higher is because of what we talked about earlier. Georgia. If Georgia beats LSU, that kind of takes away that spot that Minnesota could earn. So you really can't give them a lock even if they do win out. But Minnesota, look, it's this late. It's already at Thanksgiving. We're still talking about Minnesota as having a feasible chance at the playoff. That's pretty impressive.
Great to have you on, Seth. We will talk next week as we get really close to the final rankings. Thanks for your time. We'll be back with you a week from today.
Thanks, Paul.
Got it. We'll get your reaction at 855-242-7285. All of that coming up next.
Okay, we got the Iron Bowl at home this week. I know all of our players and our coaches are extremely excited about that. You look at last year's game and first half, I thought we played a good first half. It got away from us in the second half. We're going to have to do a good job of really playing 4 quarters of football come Saturday. When you look at them this year offensively, one of the best in the country. One of the more explosive offenses, if not the most explosive offense. You look at the receivers, they can all take short ones a long way. The running backs are very impressive. Do a good job running, but they also do a good job catching the ball out of the backfield. And then, of course, their offensive line is one of the best in the country. They do have a new quarterback, but the games he's played, he's been efficient. And looks like he has a good grasp of the offense. When you look at their defense, one of the top-ranked defenses in our league again. Real impressed with the guys they have on the back end. They've got very good ball skills and can really run. This will be our 5th top 10 opponent, so the good thing is it won't be a shock to our system, and really hoping that'll be an advantage for us. It'll be senior day, which is always special, to honor this group that has done such a good job for us. And then I want to congratulate Derek Brown, finalist for 6 national awards. He chose to come back, and he's had his best season. He's playing as good a football as anybody in the country. And, I know that Heisman is usually for offensive players and all that, but there can't be too many better players around the country than him. So real excited for him. But, I think you got to focus on the Iron Bowl right now, and the fact that we are battle tested. We played some of the best teams in the country, and so we've hung in there. We had chances to win, some of those. So I think that really helps us. And then, you look at the future. I mean, we've got some outstanding young guys. I know the focus has been on the seniors, which have done a super job, but we've got some young guys who can flat out play. So the future's real bright, real excited for the future. And, we'll cross that bridge as far as the schedule goes, next year. Yeah, when you look back at close games, there's a fine line between winning and losing, and a lot of times it's either one or two plays, impact plays when the game's on the line that you have to make to win the game, and that's probably the thing that has stood out the most. We've been very close. We had opportunities. You look back, there's one or two things, and if you would have made those plays, we would have had a good chance to win, or we'd have won the game. So, when you're playing it's the top teams, you got to make plays to win the game. And so that's really our goal for this one. And, that we'll need to do that.
Welcome back. So glad you are with us here on what's been a really interesting Tuesday afternoon. Is everybody really in a pretty good mood? And why not? It's one of the great weeks of the year. It's rivalry week, the Iron Bowl, Thanksgiving, Michigan, Ohio State. We've talked about Clemson, South Carolina. I mean, it's just amazing. And John Talty, our good friend, who one of the top editors at AL.com. John, good afternoon. How's everything in Alabama? The Iron Bowl fever at an all-time high, or is it just another Iron Bowl?
I think it's just another Iron Bowl right now, honestly. I think that, at least from what I've kind of experienced, is almost a lack of enthusiasm around that game. And I'm sure we can get into it in a little bit, but I'm not feeling kind of the sense of excitement and the sense of the stakes of this game the way that we have in some recent years down here.
Yeah, and I read in your publication website platform that 30 years ago, John, I don't know if you were born yet, the Iron Bowl, first time ever at Auburn, remains to this day one of the most incredible events I've ever been to, and I know that has been well documented, but it does seem like that game has lost something over the years.
Yeah, and Paul, I was a whopping 6 months old when that game got moved to Auburn, so I was technically around for it. I don't know if I have a ton of memories from it, but I was around. But yeah, I mean, we've had some incredible games, as you well know, over the years. The '89 game, Auburn fans still, there's so much kind of attachment to that, and it's crazy that for a lot of those people that it's already been 30 years. But you go down the line, you've had the kick six and the comeback, and even that game 2 years ago, in which Auburn won and then Alabama went on to win a national championship. There just seems to be a lot more kind of hype around it. I think in part because of the Tua injury and the hangover that's kind of lingered over the Alabama fan base. There's just a general lack of, I don't want to say interest, but just lack of, again, excitement about what's going to happen in this game. I think there's almost a resigned acceptance from Alabama fans that even if they win, they're probably not getting into the playoff.
John, let me ask you about some of the hot button issues there right now, and I don't think there's any getting around what Nick Saban said yesterday being one of them. It's not the most important thing, but just your reaction to what he said. Was it preordained? Has Nick Saban ever had a slip of the tongue? Answer being no. And how is it playing in your state?
I mean, you got to start the politicking when you can, Paul. And so, we saw it 2 years ago again after they lost and didn't make the SEC championship. Nick Saban was very active in trying to build a case, whether it was on ESPN airwaves or in other areas, to try to get his team into it. And so, I think that it's possible to slip of the tongue. I know, really meant the defensive line and not purely just the team. But, it wouldn't surprise me certainly to try to build up this game because, if Alabama wins, it's clearly going to be the best win that they have all season. And so he needs that win to feel important, to feel like it's a big deal, and to remind people that Auburn is a really good team, even if they already have 3 losses. So, it's just kind of what he has to do. And so I think we're kind of starting to see that process already. And I think that we'll see if Alabama wins that game, you're going to see Saban kind of point to how good that Auburn team is to try to kind of build the case to get into the playoff.
And John, the other story, it's not secondary, it's primary, is Gus Malzahn's future. I know if you step back and look at Auburn from a distance, it looks like a really good program. If you're standing there grabbing coffee in Lee County right now or in Auburn, you're going, Why is Malzahn so much part of the conversation about his future? Can you explain to people elsewhere why this is always a topic of conversation?
Well, I think the most obvious thing that you can point to is just what's happening in Tuscaloosa. I think that Auburn's always going to be compared to Alabama, and given the amount of success that Nick Saban has had, that's always going to be what Auburn fans want. And so when they're not able to consistently win at the level that Alabama has, and when they've, especially this year, really blown good opportunities to get these kind of marquee wins that you need to compete for a national championship, that's going to lead to fan, resentment, growing frustrations. And I think what's particularly, different about this year, again, is that, and I've mentioned this on your program before, that, Gus taking the play calling and taking, really making the offense his thing. Well, when the offense is the biggest problem with your team, that's going to lead to some serious fan frustration. And so when you look at the fact that the offense was really the biggest kind of downfall for them in their 3 losses, and they lose to Alabama, there's a good chance it'll be the offense's fault. That's why people are kind of already like, all right, what's going on here? And if Gus can't get it done this year, and with this team that he has, like, is he ever going to get it done? And I think that's kind of what leads to some growing frustration and resentment in the Auburn area.
John, does his future hang in the balance on the outcome of this game?
I don't think so, Paul. But as you well know, whether it's Iron Bowls or Egg Bowls or some of these other rivalry games, really weird results can kind of sway things one way or another. We've seen coaches lose their jobs because of the Iron Bowl or Egg Bowl results, and we've seen coaches keep their jobs because of that. So, if Alabama beats Auburn by 45 points, could I see something crazy happening? Sure. Now, for the record, I don't think that's going to happen, but you never really know what a rivalry game with this intensity and so much wrapped into it, how that's going to sway people one way or another. But I think that Gus has, privately indicated that, and he's said this in past years, and I think he's, indicated this is one of the reasons why he stayed last time he had opportunities, is that he thinks that Auburn is his best shot to win big. And so the only way that I think he's going to leave is if they tell him you got to go. And between the big buyout number and some other different factors, I find it hard to believe that Gus won't be back next season. But again, crazy things happen, and certainly, the Iron Bowl can lead to some crazy results.
John Tulsi with us, the senior sports editor at AL.com. Of course, the game is on 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 local on CBS. You wrote quite an opus the other day on the CBS contract. I realize this is awkward coming from where we sit, but explain in simple terms, if possible, what's going on between the SEC and CBS in relation to its future 3:30 window.
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, I just want to say I appreciate you using the word opus. That's a great one. I don't think people use that word that much anymore. So I appreciate that. It's a great compliment. But yeah, I think, so as everybody knows, SEC and CBS, I think in some ways, there's been such a great brand there, and there's been a lot, tension around that 2:30, 3:30 game, depending on your time zone. And, CBS wants to keep that game, and they've made that known to the SEC. But a lot of other people, including the company that you collect a paycheck from, wants this game, because it's not only are you getting the top pick each week, you're getting the Iron Bowl, you get the largest cocktail party, you're getting all these huge games, but you also get the SEC championship. And from people that I talk to, people think that the SEC championship alone is worth more than the $55 million that CBS is paying each year to the SEC for all of those rights. So we're kind of coming up to what's going to be a battle for these rights. I think that everybody expects it to be worth a lot more in the upcoming deal. It runs out in 2023, but most people expect something to happen before then. And so it's this really fascinating kind of thing on the horizon of, A, where do these games go? Do they stay at CBS? Do they go to ESPN, Fox, all these different kind of potential partners? But B, just how much money is involved. The SEC schools already get a lot of money from their television contracts, but they've been held back, especially compared to the Big Ten, because of getting, $55 million is a lot, but it's kind of paltry when we think about how much these rights could be worth. And so it's an opportunity for SEC schools to get an injection of serious money when this next contract comes up.
Yeah, and for those who didn't read it, I would recommend everyone going back to read John's piece from last Thursday. It's about as comprehensive a piece on the relationship between the SEC and its television partners. But that deal was done, I believe, 10 or 11 years ago. John, the television world is not the same as it was when then Commissioner Mike Slive signed that long-term deal with CBS. At the time, signing with a blue blood network like CBS seemed like a good deal. Today, CBS's role in the world, the television world, has diminished, and the money certainly has exploded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the game's constantly changing, and I think, I know that Mike Slive was a friend of yours, and I always thought extremely high of him, and I think he made so many great deals. If you look back at a little bit of, hindsight, locking in a 15-year deal at the time that they did, at the money that they did, maybe hasn't aged the best, but so much, as you said, has changed, and, there was this fear in the past, of cord cutting and things like that these big money deals are going to start dropping in value, but we're really seeing the exact opposite. We see that these numbers keep going higher and higher and higher because live sports is still what draws people to the TV. So CBS has had an incredible discount for a long time. I'm sure they've made a lot of money off the SEC. It's probably been very good for their brand, but if they want to keep the SEC going forward, they're going to have to jack up that price by at least a quadruple amount. We're talking 200+ million. A lot of people think potentially 250 to 300 million. And so it's just a lot has changed since 2008, which is the last time they had this extension. And by the end of the deal, 2023, I mean, a lot can change in this industry again. I mean, it's constantly evolving, as you well know.
Yeah, John, we had Vince Thompson on this program Friday from Athens. He's, as you probably know, the head of Melt, which is one of the nation's leading sports marketing firms. And he said the number, quite frankly, in today's unpredictable environment, could even go as high as $400 or $500 million. I mean, that's how valuable this package is, and how undervalued and really, you said it. I mean, what CBS is paying for it is quite, was just downright ridiculous, if I might say so myself. John, great to have you on. Always a pleasure. Just people should go back and read John's piece. It's been universally received and commended by many people in the industry. We will talk to you soon. See you this weekend, I hope.
Thank you so much, Paul. Absolutely, and appreciate all your praise as always. It's extremely kind.
Thank you very much. John Talty, the senior sports editor at AL.com, truly one of the outstanding young reporter editors in the sports field today. Just delightful to have him on. We are going to take a break. More of your phone calls after.
And to your point, beyond Ed Ogeron, I mean, Pruitt probably would be the conversation. And the conversation really doesn't need to go past Ogeron at this point. But if you did dip down into a second tier, I think Pruitt probably would be in it. I mean, it's kind of remarkable the fact that they started 0-2, the inexplicable loss to Georgia State. They blow it against BYU, and I think a lot of people, probably myself included, frankly, had them left for dead after that 1-4 start, and then they've turned it around with better quarterback play, and the defense has really got going in this 4-game winning streak. I think it's better for Tennessee, rather than to have a couple of those top 25 victories, to beat all the teams in the SEC East that you're trying to pass, to at least get yourself into the top tier, to where they're still not in the conversation with Georgia and Florida. Frankly, they're probably still quite a ways off from that. But they're now establishing themselves as the top of that next pack, whereas coming into this season, they'd been the bottom of that other pack for the last couple seasons. I think he really struggled early on. I felt like he was swimming in Jim Chaney's offense. I think there was the belief, myself included, coming into the season, that Jim Chaney was going to be really good for Garantano. And I think ultimately he probably still is. But the fact is, at the beginning of the season, Garantano was working with his fourth offensive coordinator in as many seasons, and you just felt like he was swimming in that offense. And then I think he made some bad decisions. His confidence probably got shaken a little bit. And I thought we'd pretty well seen the last of him. When he fumbled on that quarterback sneak against Alabama, I really felt like the coaching staff had lost all faith in him, all trust in him at that point. Certainly the fan base was up in arms with Garantano at that point over that fumbled quarterback sneak. And I thought that was pretty much going to be it for the Garantano era. Now, they needed him, and so he played by necessity the couple weeks after that, because his freshman replacement, Brian Maurer, had some injury concerns. And Garantano, to his credit, performed pretty well in relief. And so then there was like this narrative that maybe he's just better off the bench, which never really made sense because he'd started so many games in his career and he'd had some good games last year as a starter. I really think what it was is they simplified the offense a little bit for him. And then in the other direction, I think he just got a better understanding of what Jim Chaney wanted out of him and the expectations. Early in the season, I think he was improvising a little too much in terms of changing Chaney's play calls and maybe just had a little bit too much freedom and not sure what to do with it. Now I think he's got a much better handle on it. He's confident, and the team has bought back in him, too. I think this team is fully behind him.
Welcome back. Glad you're with us here on a Tuesday afternoon. We're 2.5 hours away from what is not expected to be a very eventful college football ranking show. We believe it will be pretty much according to plan. Maybe what Rob Mullins says will be watched and listened to very closely, but the Alabama-Auburn game obviously is going to dictate so much this weekend. Let's go to Will next. Hey, Will, nice of you to call.
Hey, Paul, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
First of all, let me commend you for your professionalism in working through this illness for the last couple of weeks. It's just, with so many people bagging work, for the slightest things, jumping on planes from city to city and doing multiple programs and maintaining the show. I'm sure I speak for a lot of people in saying how much.
Well, let me say this, and I sincerely apologize for sounding as bad as I have sounded, but I really believe it's just. I mean, you know the calendar of the last couple of weeks, and I'm not somebody who feels like this show can't go on without me. I know it can, but I just really didn't want to miss any of this. And if there's only so much. If you're really sick, you can't get on a plane. I've never been really sick. So I just want people to know that it's not like I'm getting on a plane with IV in my veins. I'm just getting on a plane that I probably in May or June would have not gotten on, but right now I want to be here, and I do appreciate the audience in indulging what has to be a rather terrible sounding host. But thank you anyway.
Hey, well, we appreciate you too. Hey, I'd like to get your perspective on something. 3 years ago, I remember watching LSU play Texas A&M in College Station, and during the whole broadcast, all we heard about was how Tom Herman was going to be the next coach at LSU, replacing Ed Orgeron. And the year before, at the same game in Tiger Stadium, when Les Miles was coaching for his job.
Oh yeah.
All we could hear was how Jimbo Fisher was going to be the next coach at LSU, or that was the rumor at least. And then,
by the way, that was not a rumor, Will. That was happening.
Oh, I know it was, and we came to find out that LSU refused to pay the price tag that came with Jimbo Fisher. At least that's what I'm hearing. And then, of course, we know that Herman was using LSU as a negotiating chip to get the job at Texas. And then what I've heard for 2-3 years now is that LSU had to settle. But my question to you is, with what we see today, did they really settle? And I know hindsight's 20/20, but if you look at the contracts that were structured, Ed Orgeron was a steal. I mean, even if you look at it from like a risk versus reward, I mean, I think they pay him they started paying him only about $3.5 million a year, which is nothing. I don't make nothing close to that, But I mean, 3.5 a year for a top-flight program in the SEC, that's almost minimum wage. I mean, would you?
No,
agree?
that's ridiculous. Listen, I'm with you, and I don't want to act like we're sneezing at that kind of money. We're not. But in the parlance of big-time college football, that's at the low end.
Right, and I think this year he's only making $4 million. Of course, he's going to make more than that with incentives, but it's not going to come close to the $7.4 or $5 million that Jimbo Fisher is making at Texas A&M. And by the way, I know you know this, all of that money is guaranteed. So he signed a $75 million contract. And we look at ourselves entering the last week of the 2019 season, we see Herman is struggling in Texas. We see Jimbo Fisher has yet, unless you want to count that LSU game last year, has a defining win at Texas A&M. And Ed Orgeron is leading the LSU Tigers into the SEC championship game with a possible playoff bid and a national championship. And I just want to know, what do you think as far as moving forward, moving after 2019, wherever the calls fall? Where do you see these programs? I mean, and then I also like to see what you think about. This might be a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but wasn't it Scott Woodward that negotiated that contract with Jimbo Fisher, and now he's at LSU within what?
Well, yeah. It was exactly Scott Woodward who negotiated that. Let me say that. Let me take Jimbo Fisher first. I still believe Jimbo Fisher will be successful at A&M. I'm not making excuses for anybody, I promise you. But I think this year's schedule is as difficult as I've ever seen. And, Saturday will mark the third number one team in the country he has faced, and he didn't win any of those. He's lost to Georgia, which is a top 4 team. The only game I think that I might quibble with is losing to Auburn. I know it was an 8-point game, but it just seemed like it was a lot more than that. That was at home. I think Tom Herman may be beyond salvage at Texas. I don't see. I mean, I know he went to the Sugar Bowl last year, and Ellinger talked about how we're back, but I mean that program is a train wreck right now, and it's going to show up in recruiting at the worst possible time. And I'm not crazy. I've never been wildly crazy about Joe Oliva's tenure in Baton Rouge, but I'll give the guy credit. He stood firm, and had he not, he would have gone on to someone other than Orgeron. So it turned out to be, unanswered prayers, whatever cliche you want to throw in there. It just happened to be the steal of the century.
Well, and I agree with you, and I'm not a big fan of Joe Oliva. I think he was, let's just say, I think he was a tad arrogant at times.
He was more than that.
But I also believe that, what do you think it was luck? Do you think it was fate? I do believe that, when you look at it, let's say Orgeron would have basically performed as well as Herman is performing in Texas. You're looking at a minimal buyout and with enough money to go out and find a head coach of maybe greater stature. But you know what? Hey, I'm happy with though. I always thought it was a good move. I never thought, and Glenn Gilbo, who you have on your show a lot, stated once that, he didn't think that either Fisher or Herman would be a good choice because they take care of one side of the ball, but, with what Fisher left at Florida State, and when I look at programs and coaches, it's not so much of where, what they do once they get to the program, but how they leave the program. And I know Willie Taggart had some blame to what's going on at Florida State right now, but I also think that Jimbo Fisher left that program in pretty bad shape. And I was very surprised that he got a $74 or $75 million contract guaranteed over 10 years. To me, that was just crazy.
Great to have you on, Will. Great analysis. Thank you very much. We're heading to a break. A lot to do on this Tuesday afternoon program. More of your phone calls when we come back. Welcome back. We are glad you're here, and let's get to the calls at 855-242-7285. Jeff is in Columbus, Ohio.
What's going on, Paul Finebaum?
Hey, Jeff.
Why is everybody surprised you're playing hurt? If you were going to take time off, you'd have taken last week off when the whole SEC took it off. Why would you take it off now? It's rivalry week. It's go time, isn't it?
Yeah, well, last week was I guess I could have missed the Western Carolina-Alabama game. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you could have, but you got to play hurt, Paul. I don't know why these people are surprised. You're not the one to take time off. Come on. Hey, I heard that guy talking to you last segment about coaches and your thoughts on them, that was a perfect segue. I got to find out where you stand about Harbaugh now. I'm thinking you're going to take a job with Waffle House the way you go back and forth on Harbaugh. Tell me where you think Harbaugh's at right now.
I'll tell you Saturday about 3 o'clock. How about that?
I mean, you got to admit the biggest fear I've got is the odds are in Michigan's favor. They're due, if you nothing else. That's my biggest fear. I mean, you could only beat the same team how many straight times? You know what I'm saying? The odds. I mean, you got that FPI guy on. I got to believe the odds are starting to lean Michigan's favor just from losing so many times in a row. I mean,
yeah. One more thing, Jeff.
That's a big concern.
I think it's the emotional aspect too. I mean, listen. Ohio State's coming off of its most difficult game of the year. That takes a toll.
Yeah. And no doubt Michigan's laying in the weeds. You know Harbaugh didn't like that beatdown we gave him last year out of nowhere. It kind of reminds me, unfortunately, back in the day when Woody went up there and spanked them up there, and then we came back with the best team in the country, and we got, Schembeckler made his name for himself way back when. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm kind of hoping Ryan Day was playing it close to the vest last week in the passing game, to be honest with you, because those crossing routes and stuff was how we torched Michigan last year, and I didn't see any of that against Penn State. Did you notice that?
Listen, that game was so easy too, Jeff, at the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Did you watch the whole thing?
No, I saw the second half. I was flying during the first half.
Yeah. Yeah, it got to be a little struggle there in the third quarter. There's no doubt about it. But, hey, when's the next ranking release, Paul? I'm not sure.
That will be.
What is that? I mean, is tonight the UPI or the Sport Magazine ranking release?
This is the Street and Smith.
I didn't know they coming out. If they were playing it smart, tonight would be the first time we see a ranking for the playoffs. That's the way it should be done. The week before rivalry week when everybody's all fired up. And speaking of the ranking, why are Bama fans all concerned about Oklahoma and Utah and all those teams? The team they should be worried about is Georgia, don't you think?
Well, yes, but, that's out of their control. If Georgia wins, Alabama's going somewhere other than the playoff.
Yeah, because there's no way. I don't care what the FPI or all those analytics say. There is no way if Georgia wins the SEC, unless utter chaos happens, that Bama's getting in to be the third SEC team. There's no way.
No.
I don't care what the FPI says. I mean, don't you agree there's no way 3 SEC teams are getting in?
Well, there's only one way, and that is Clemson losing.
Right. But who are they going to lose to?
South Carolina?
The Gamecocks?
Either South Carolina
the only way
or
Clemson loses is if Cat Daddy gets into the hotel of the Clemson Tigers and gives them that Palmetto moonshine the night before.
Yeah, no, I don't see that happening. I'm sorry.
No. And somebody out of the Big Ten's getting in. I don't, unless something really wacky happens, somebody from the Big Ten's getting in, don't you think?
Yeah, I think Minnesota could win out and probably get in over most schools.
Yeah, if they don't lose and they beat who they got, Wisconsin this week, and then hopefully Ohio State. Yeah, we're in the. So yeah, Minnesota's in if they win out. So
yeah, listen. I don't think anybody I don't think anybody realistically thinks the SEC's going to get 3.
Well, that's why I don't know why Bama fans are all bent out of shape about comparing their resume to Utah.
Well, they're just doing it to do it. Listen, what else are they going to do right now?
Right. I guess so. I guess not make travel plans to Atlanta. That's for darn sure. They
don't like Atlanta anyway. They've done better not going to Atlanta a couple of times.
That's true.
Saban, two of Saban's 5 national championships have not been routed through Atlanta. Hey, thanks for the call. Thanks for the Big Ten report brought to you by Jeff.
First of all, let me say happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Commodore Nation, happy holidays. It's rivalry week, Tennessee week. It's always a great rivalry, great game to be involved with. Excited about it, truly excited about it. This game will be for us in our last game of 2019. But this team had a great practice today. We hit the field, a lot of energy. And the tempo was good. We got better, and we're just trying to move it ahead. We're looking for our best game on Saturday. Coming off the win, I think these guys have confidence, in terms of where we're at, where we got to go. And we just got to continue, to push, in ourselves, to get the most out of these opportunities to practice, okay, and be with one another and make sure, that we continue to flow and just get after one another. Ask these guys to be greedy, and that's exactly what we want to be. We want to, again, grab these reps, make sure, that we push each other and play good football, and that's what we're moving towards on Saturday. For us, this week brings about, a lot of feelings and emotions, and it's a rivalry game. And, when you talk about it just a little bit, you try to give the history of the game, to these guys a little bit. And you talk about, what it means to the state. And there's two teams, in this state, both play in the SEC. It divides lines, in terms of families. You've got Vanderbilt grads, you got Tennessee grads on both sides of those lines, and just really trying to give those guys, who haven't really experienced the rivalry yet or understand, much about the rivalry, some history. And we go out and practice, we're hearing Rocky Top, just to get these guys used to the song, the crowd noise, just trying to familiarize these guys with the atmosphere a little bit, with a little bit of crowd noise. And I think it's about, giving a little bit of a history lesson and then trying to project onto, this football team, what we have to do in this ball game, to play well and to give ourselves, a chance for success on Saturday.
We welcome you back here on the program, and it's always great to have you here as the sun beginning to set on this day before Thanksgiving. Had a chance to see the cover of Sports Illustrated today, and it's Joe Burrow under the heading From Average Joe to Number One Pro. The writer, our next guest, Ross Dellinger, who has covered a lot of LSU in his time, and he goes to Sports Illustrated, and Ross, you're still covering LSU. Great to have you on. What's going on?
Hey, Paul. Yeah, I can't get away from the Tigers, right? I've kind of been assigned to them as my playoff team. We kind of split up beats as the playoff and the teams start whittling down. And of course, naturally, I get LSU and I'm heading to Baton Rouge actually this weekend to spend a few days. So they're a pretty incredible and interesting story this year in college football.
Well, the sub headline is it's the greatest story in college football, and listen, there are a lot of really good stories out there this year, but it's hard to explain Joe Burrow to the average fan in the hinterlands, which of course Sports Illustrated has to appeal to. They're not like their regular Finebaum show or Baton Rouge morning show listeners. How do you explain how somebody who, let's be honest, left Ohio State because he struggled to get in the lineup, goes to LSU and has a good year, but certainly not a great year, and then this?
Yeah, it's tough, and that was one of the purposes of that story is to call people experts in the not just college football, but the NFL, and try to get them to explain it to you. How did this happen? And obviously talking to people around LSU, how did this happen? And I think it's a bunch of factors, but really, I think the main one, Paul, is the guy has had this talent for a while, was beat out by very, very good players at Ohio State. I mean, look who he was behind, at Ohio State, J.T. Barrett and Dwayne Haskins. And, Burrow, his second year at Ohio State, broke his thumb during the competition to be the backup Dwayne Haskins, and that kind of put him behind, and it put him behind the next year in the battle with Dwayne Haskins. And in Urban Meyer, I think I don't know if this made the story or not, but Urban Meyer told Jimmy Burrow, Joe's dad, your son and Dwayne Haskins are virtually equal. He could win the job over the summer. But they didn't want to take that risk, and they kind of felt like still Dwayne was slightly ahead. So they decided to transfer. And, so getting back to the point of how this happened, I think he's always had the talent. I think it's always been there. LSU now has an offense, Paul, that's able to show it off. And as one LSU staff member put it really well is, last year's offense with Joe Burrow last year, we were asking him to play Uno when he's a chess master. And now he's playing a little chess, and we're seeing he's very good at it.
Let me ask you, because the story, we all know about Joe Brady, but he wasn't there last year when Joe made the decision. What was the determining factor for Joe to go to LSU?
Well, it's a great question because, there was 25 schools. When he announced he was leaving Ohio State, there were more than 25 schools that showed interest in him, including actually Alabama and Georgia. At the time, they both had two quarterbacks, and so there's no way he was going there. But I think both schools were scared, afraid that they would lose, one of those quarterbacks. Alabama afraid Jalen or Tua, the loser of the battle, would leave, and Georgia was obviously afraid early on that Fields was leaving. He ended up leaving. So they were both actually after Joe, and there was 20 more teams, and he whittled it down to he basically made the decision based on how good of his opportunity was to be the starter at that school. It was a combination of he wanted to play big games, and he whittled it down to Cincinnati, where one of his former coaches at Ohio State was the head coach, Luke Fickell, and LSU. And I think what it came down to is playing in big games. He wanted to play in big games, and he saw the opportunity there that he could play in big games. And you got to give Coach O some credit, right? The guy is a heck of a recruiter. Danny Burrow, Joe's brother, told me a story. He went on that visit to LSU where they wined and dined the family. Took him out for crawfish and had these long X's and O's meetings and all this stuff. And Danny said at the end, Coach O obviously knew Danny Burrow was a pretty big influencer in Joe's life and decision. So as they were walking out the door to leave, Orgeron took Danny Burrow aside and said, "Here's my cell number. Please keep in touch." And Danny was just blown away. The head coach at LSU just gave me his cell number. And, they talked that week. That was a long week, I think, leading up to the decision. Joe talked with Danny. Danny talked with, I think, Coach O. And I think they settled on he wanted to play big games and wanted the best opportunity, and we thought LSU was it.
So we know the backstory. We know what's happened. Explain how Joe went from a better-than-average quarterback, maybe ranked third, fourth, somewhere in there in the SEC, to the number one player in college football and the number one projected player in the NFL draft.
I think it all goes back to that, just the opportunities in that offense. Just throwing the ball more, for one, and having receivers that he spent a whole offseason with, So I think the talent has been there for a while. I think now everybody's just kind of starting to see it. And you got to remember last year, too, he was a little banged up. There's some things that still have not come out, I don't think, publicly about Joe last year, about his injuries. He was battling some stuff. We've written a little bit about his separated shoulder he was going through. There was some other things. He was beat up a little bit. This year he's healthy. He's in an offense that gives him all these opportunities, right, to throw the football. He spent an entire offseason with a group of a lot of them 5-star receivers, throwing to them. I think the receiving group at LSU, there's kind of a cool story that I read a few weeks ago. They caught 10,000 balls, each of them, during the offseason. A lot of them thrown by Joe Burrow. They worked together every week during the offseason. They met at the indoor facility. So I just think all those combination of things lead us to this right now, where this guy goes from his dad said the highest he had heard was 4th, 5th round for his son. That was during the summer when agents and scouts would call. And, of course, now he's here in 1st round. And to make that leap, I think it's just all those things, the opportunity in the offense, the work with receivers over the offseason. And Joe has obviously improved, I'm sure, over the offseason, whether it be footwork and things like that. But he's just given the opportunity, I think, is what it is.
Talking to Ross Dellinger. Ross, so let's broaden this out a little bit just before you go and get your thoughts on where you think we are with the college football playoff ranking, which is coming out in about 2 hours.
Well, the big thing I'm watching for, obviously, two things, I think, is obviously the number 1 spot and the number 4 spot is what we're going to look toward. That's kind of the 2 big competitions to me. But as for tonight, the big thing, where's Alabama? Are they still in front of Utah? Because if they're still in front of Utah, that can be pretty telling, because does Alabama have some kind of chance to stay in front of Utah, to stay in front of Oklahoma with a big win at Auburn? So I think tonight, that's the big thing is where is Alabama? Are they still in front of Utah? I would think they would still be in front of Oklahoma, but where are they at when compared to Utah?
Great stuff from Ross Dellinger, the cover story this week in SI. Great to have you on, Ross. We'll look forward to having everyone read the article, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Paul.
Great stuff. Ross Dellinger, outstanding writer, joining us from Sports Illustrated. We are back with your phone calls after this. And let's talk to Shannon in Georgia.
What's up, Paul? How you doing today, bud?
Hey, great to have you on.
Hey, man, you're sounding better. I know that cough is still hanging on, but sounding better. Hey,
Thank you very much.
I want to reach out to you. No problem. I want to reach out to you and give you my point of view as a Georgia fan on why I think Jeremy Pruitt has done an outstanding job this year. And I was critical of him at the beginning of the year, but I think he's done a better job than Ed Orgeron. And here's the reason I say that, Paul. I don't think Pruitt had the ingredients to make the gumbo, so to speak, and hasn't had at Tennessee since he's been there. I think Tennessee's gone a couple of years without an NFL draft pick in the first 7 rounds. If I'm not mistaken, LSU's been loaded with talent. And while Coach O has done a great job, not taking anything away from him, Jeremy Pruitt and that staff up there, they really had to make something out of nothing. And they have really turned that thing around up there. And I think Tennessee down the road is going to be back in the SEC East picture. Just want to get your take on that.
I feel pretty good about it. And I know Pat Dooley was on earlier scoffing at Tennessee, as you may have heard. But I think you have to build a foundation, and Jeremy has now done that. Going to a bowl game is critical. I'm not a big fan of playing the bowl-eligible game that so many schools do, but in his case, it was critical. And now he must translate that to recruiting and start beating some big teams on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And speaking of Pat Dooley, there's something I wanted to get with you about a week or two ago. Let me ask you this question, Paul. If Nick Saban was going off the field and in a post-game interview with, say, CBS or ESPN, what are the chances that you would ever hear Nick Saban say, "Go Dogs" or "War Eagle"?
I've never heard Saban do that. That's a common response from certain coaches. Saban's just a different type of coach. He's a pro coach who coaches. He's always aware. He's always sending messages through his interviews, and primarily he cares about his team.
Well, and the reason I ask this is, when Mullen had defeated Missouri and Georgia was getting ready to kick off against Auburn, they were interviewing Mullen on CBS, and as far as his take on was Florida still alive in the playoffs, and his response to the interviewer was War Eagle. And I was just really surprised.
Yeah, but let me, in defense of Mullen, he had a vested interest in that game. He needed Georgia to lose the game to give him any shot. He was, Dan Mullen is a guy we all knew in high school that was always the cut up, and he was funny, and he didn't really care what we thought or the teacher thought. and he still doesn't.
Well, I don't think it's going to be too long before Tennessee is contending again in the East, and Florida has dropped off based on the approach of the two coaches. That's just my take on it, Paul. I appreciate you taking my call.
Thank you. Really good to hear from you. Josh is up next in Birmingham. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
We are doing great. Thank you.
So I just want to talk a little bit. First, I want to go into, if you're talking about the eye test and you're comparing Bama and Utah, yes, we haven't seen Mac Jones in a big-time game, but still, you look at both teams, I still say Alabama. Am I an Alabama fan? Yes. But a lot of the media is just acting like they act like Mac Jones was playing, intramural football in the quad a few days ago when, Nick Saban, one of the best recruiters in the nation, got this guy because he felt he could do the job. So, if you're talking about Mac Jones and let's say Alabama does go and take care of business and takes down an Auburn team that has one of the elite defenses in the country, I just don't see how you keep Alabama out.
Well, I agree with you on that. And, I don't know the answer on Mac Jones. Doesn't matter what I think or you think. Saturday is his day to shine. And if Alabama shines, I think it's case closed. You've heard the numbers, you've heard the metrics. Utah does not have a case other than a bunch of sycophants in the media who hate Alabama. They don't have any support out there.
I think that's the bottom line. It really feels like people are just tired of seeing Alabama succeed. They're tired of seeing them in the
listen,
playoffs.
I'm not going to name all the names because they're all easy to find, but when you see somebody put Alabama 8th or 6th or 7th, they're just hating on Alabama. And I know the nation will rise up and go, oh, there's Paul Finebaum. He's a Nick Saban apologist. I'm not a Nick Saban apologist. I'm just speaking the truth. I'm speaking the truth based on what I see, and I think what you'll see tonight. If Alabama is not 5th, then I believe this committee has sold out. In fact, I really do think you could make an argument. I'm not sure it would be a winning argument, but I think the real debate is whether Alabama should be 4th as opposed to 6th.
Well, like you said earlier in your show, though, that's going to take care of itself. Obviously, if Georgia wins the SEC championship, there's no discussion. They deserve to be in it over Alabama. So, really, that'll take care of itself in the end.
Thank you for the call. Really do appreciate it. Let's continue as we roll on. Jay is in Knoxville. Hello, Jay. Nice of you to call.
Hello, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
It seems like you're having a good day today. This week is thank you. I'm thankful for this week, and I'm thankful for your show for 5 years, Paul. Disabled, and you for 5 years have kept me entertained, and I really appreciate it. Just like the guy in Kentucky, Ron, he appreciates you. I do, and there's probably other people out there like me that appreciate your show so much, and it helps us get through the day a lot better. And I just called to wish you a good Thanksgiving, and all your listeners too. Have a
Jay,
good day.
I don't know how to thank you. That means so much to all of us on the program, and when I say that, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that you never see that make this show what it is. And I don't want to cry on your shoulder here. Sometimes you don't realize the effect you're having. I run into people and they may say something nice, but you go through a lot. In the business that we're in, we're most of the time we're criticized, whether it's externally or internally, for every little thing that goes wrong. And when I hear someone like you who says something so eloquent and so heartwarming, it really makes all of us feel great. Thank you so much.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Have
Paul.
a great Thanksgiving. Really appreciate that a lot. Paul is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hello, Paul.
Hello, sir. How I enjoy the show. I have a question for you. I'm a fifth-generation Razorback, and it's a tough year with a coach turnover. And it just seems this year there's not as much hot seat talk at this point in the year. Usually it seems we have 3 or 4 coaches that are right on the edge. And I wondered if you kind of noticed the same thing, if this is kind of we had Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, a couple different coaches that were early in the season on the edge. Your thoughts?
Well, Paul, I think there are more than you think. We've already seen one coach fired in Chad Morris. I think there's a critical game this week that could tip the balance. And I think there's another game that won't have any bearing, but there could still be a change. And I see at least 3 coaches who are vulnerable right now. And I'm not going to name them because I'm somewhat reluctant just to throw a bunch of stuff out there. But I think everyone knows or could take a pretty good guess on the 3 that I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you think there are that many coaches that are on the fence or waiting in the wings? Are there more or less than usual?
Well, listen, the national landscape is interesting. Florida State's already open. We know that. They'll have a coach pretty quickly. I know that is currently going on. So wherever that coach comes from will then open up another door. Southern Cal is the biggest mystery. It looks like Clay Helton may survive, which would be one of the biggest upsets of the year. So that's probably the biggest job that won't open if it goes according to plan. And then you have some other jobs out there. So I know Mark Stoops addressed the Florida State issue. I think it will be more interesting to see what happens after the Louisville game. In the SEC. I think the Egg Bowl is critically important. I think you could see a really unhappy fan base. I think Will Muschamp is safe for now, but I think you have to watch the tone and tenor of that game. And don't forget, let's just say Auburn loses. Does Gus Malzahn decide, you know what, I'm going to Arkansas, and suddenly the Auburn situation is open? So I do think there are 3 to 4 possibilities of coaching movement, depending on what happens this weekend.
Thanks, Paul. Have a good holiday.
Thank you very much. Same to you. We're up against a break. I hope you'll stick around another hour and a half of the program. We have had a great time on this Tuesday. We will be here tomorrow.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of hard feelings. They thought they should have won that game, and they still feel that way. And so all that kind of goes into it. But so there's the emotional value to it, and but there's also something interesting Joe Burrow talked about on Saturday is the Texas A&M game was kind of where they found themselves with the offense that they kind of run now. Towards the end of the second half, they started to run more spread plays. This was a team that was max protect for most of the year. Bring in a tight end, an extra running back to block because their pass protection was not good. So that was the first time where they thought, okay, if we get more guys out of the backfield, produce more options to throw for Joe Burrow, we'll give up less sacks. And it worked out. Part of it, Burrow admitted, was because they'd run out of plays. So toward into the overtime, they kind of had to expand on some things. And then they went into the Central Florida game in the Fiesta Bowl and went more spread. And Joe Burrow had a heck of a game, and I think that catapulted him into this season. And that's when they started to really realize that that's the offensive direction they wanted to go. Ohio State is now in the heart of its conference schedule. I mean, they played against Penn State pretty tightly for most of that game, and they'll have Michigan coming up, and we'll really have a full understanding of just how complete a team Ohio State is. I think you can think of former teams like USC where they were just blowing out everybody in their conference just because they were proving to everybody that they were head and shoulders above everyone else, and I think that's what Ohio State was doing for most of the part. Up until the Penn State game, nobody was within 21 points of them. I think Clemson's kind of doing the same thing since their close call with North Carolina. But I think for sure, seeing how Ohio State does against Michigan and in their Big Ten championship game, you can start to have more an apples to apples comparison with LSU, and I do believe it is a close call. He hasn't really mentioned the Heisman as much. I think he understands how good they are as an offense. And that's kind of the terms he puts it if you ask him any questions about that kind of stuff. On Saturday, he did mention that some of the offensive records that they had may never be broken again. And I think that's, a sense of what they've been able to accomplish offensively. And, there have been questions about that the past couple of weeks. Ever since they beat Alabama, he's been the clear front runner. And, someone asked Ed Ogeron today about whether he thought he would win the Heisman. And he said Ed Ogeron said that in his heart he thinks that he's the best quarterback in the nation, best player in the nation. So whoever they play in that first round is going to be tough. So
down the line, I think that it really doesn't matter as much as we try and make it so.
We welcome all of you back to the program. Glad you're here, and certainly a lot going on. Ricky is in Mississippi, and you are next up. Ricky, good evening.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
We're doing great.
I'm glad you're feeling better. I know you're still fighting a little bit, but I got a observation on the Egg Bowl and the Iron Bowl, and with the Egg Bowl, do you think that Moorhead is going to be the referee on his job if he loses his Egg Bowl?
Well, let's think about this for a second. Ricky, if he loses the game, what's the record? 5-7, is that right?
Yeah, because they're trying to get to a bowl, I think, if they beat Ole Miss, yeah.
So he has a losing record. He doesn't go to a bowl game in his second year. I don't know I don't know what John Cohen is thinking tonight. I know what he was thinking about 6 weeks ago when we interviewed him, and he went.
I remember that, man. You talked about that. How he was dancing.
Well, I mean, listen. He made me out to be like a bad guy that I was even bringing up the story. I just simply asked him if about the rumors that Moorhead may be going to Rutgers.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He told me how impressed he was with Moorhead, and I'm not there every day. I don't see what Mr. Cohen sees. Maybe he sees something that we don't see.
He saw practice. They did practice well.
Yeah, listen, they're according to Mr. Cohen, they're the best practice team in America.
Right. But now on the other hand, with Ole Miss, the coach at Ole Miss, though, I just think that he has that same kind of aura about himself that Ed Orgeron, because he's from the state, and he may endear himself to a lot of the recruits coming out, the top recruits coming out of the state, I believe, because he had that same, he went to school there, and he believes Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ricky, you're right. Listen, everyone is different. I mean, I wish I could be like other people. I mean, I love people, but I'm not a bubbling personality like somebody else who wraps their arms around you. I mean, everyone has got their own personality, and Matt Luke is has an infectious personality.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You want to pull for the guy because his dad played at Ole Miss and his brother played.
Yeah, and see, Ed Orgeron, coming from the state of Louisiana, had, the Cajun. I mean, he endeared himself to that state.
I mean, listen. I'm a Southerner. Okay, I don't want to. But I'm the son of Yankees.
Yeah.
Joe Moorhead is a guy that grew up in Pittsburgh.
Right.
He went to school at Fordham, which is in New York. He coached in New York.
Right.
His favorite sports team is the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, you tell me, Ricky. I grew up in Memphis. You're in Mississippi. What part of Mississippi are you from?
Well, I'm from a little town right south of Jackson, around Hazelhurst.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Actually, that's the hometown of Robert Johnson.
Sure. Oh yeah.
The blues singer. Yeah, Robert Johnson.
Oh yeah. So listen, you and I grew up in the same time zone.
Yeah.
We didn't pull for the Pittsburgh Pirates as kids.
No, Atlanta Braves fan.
Yeah, of course. I was between the Braves and the St. Louis Cardinals because I was
exactly because you're kind of halfway.
Yeah, but so I mean, this guy parachutes into Starkville, Mississippi, and and by the way, he's a perfectly nice guy.
I generally like the guy. But
yeah,
it's like a fish out of water in a way, though.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was a kid, I went fishing with my dad, and we go. All of a sudden, the fish is flopping around the boat, and that's Joe Moorhead. He just doesn't.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. They're probably going to keep him another year, which I could deal with that if because he may improve. He may turn around, but we'll never know. We won't know until next year. But about the Iron Bowl, though, what Nick Saban said, about facing the best team I think he's ever faced this year. I tell you, I think it's the best front seven he faced.
Oh, there's no. Listen, you would have to you'd have to go into the NFL to find a better front seven.
Yeah, I mean, so he, in a way, he was kind of halfway right on that, and because he knows what he's going to face with Auburn, man. That them guys played against one another in high school, man. I mean, it's going to feel like it's the best team when they get out there on that field.
Well, you know what I don't understand, Ricky, why people get so upset about what coaches say when you know they're not ever telling you the truth.
Verbally, man, come on. I mean, they got to say stuff, to motivate their team, to get the media, kind of started up.
Hey, I'll tell you a true story. When I was a Cub reporter, I was covering Alabama football first year, and Alabama was playing Arkansas State. And I went to interview Bear Bryant, and he said, Arkansas State scares me to death. And I wrote that in my beginning of the article. I said, Bear Bryant, says, a headline, and my editor called me in and like threw something at me. He said, "What? Are you out of your mind? I mean, Arkansas State's like a 60-point underdog." I said, "Hey, I'm just quoting the guy directly. I mean, I don't make up the news. I report it." And I was a smart aleck reporter. You can rest assured. But I figured if Bear Bryant said it, then it's got to be the gospel.
Yeah, right. But it's Nick Saban. He's he's the second Bear. So everything that comes out of his mouth, they're gonna breathe everything into it. And one more thing, Paul, I like to with Tua, my prayers go out to him, but also to C.J. Morgan. I know he didn't get a lot of press. His injury was season ending. It happened. Maybe a few plays after Tua got hurt, and for State. So his season is over with, and I know he deserves to get prayers from just like Tua, because they all have dreams. All them guys have dreams, and even though I know he's a top guy in college football. But these guys out there they're giving their all trying to make it.
Great to have you on. What a fantastic phone call. All the best, Ricky. Legend is up next.
What's going on, Coach? What's going on?
Legend.
So Joe Burrow for Heisman, huh? Wow. I tell you who I want to vote for Heisman, Paul. I'm going to cast my vote for Heisman right now. You know who I'm voting for Heisman?
No.
The officials, Paul. No one has made more big plays this year or impacted the game more in college football than the officials, Paul. I'm voting for the ref for Heisman this year. He is definitely the Heisman this year, Paul. I agree with the A&M fans. They got rips at him. Every game I watch this year, an official makes a huge play or directly affects the outcome of a game. And as a fan, Paul, I'm just sick of it. And I'm not the only one sick of it. And it's time that college football did something to address it. It's just to a pathetic point now, Paul. I mean, am I wrong? I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, Paul.
Well, Legend, contractually, I'm not allowed to comment on SEC officiating.
I mean, every time I turn your show on, you apologizing for something. So why don't you just
hey, Legend,
out there and apologize for it?
Hey, Legend, you know me. I mean, I'm not that Paul Finebaum I used to be. I've got shackles on my feet right now.
Well, every time I turn on the show, you apologizing for something.
Yeah, I mean, you never see me from the waist down, but I'm locked in here. I'm not. If I dare criticize someone like that, I can't get out of here.
Oh man, this getting bad, Paul. You need to start walking around New York. You look good in New York. You look like the cowboy way, dude. I'm proud of you, man. Hey, I don't know what these media members are drinking, but it's definitely spiked with haterade. It's definitely spiked with haterade. You know, the claim that Utah and Oklahoma belongs in ahead of Alabama, that's just a lack of football knowledge.
Hey, one of them comes from your buddy Tim Brando.
Hey, I got great respect for Brando, the best play-by-play man in the business. Me and him's buried the hatchet a couple times. But at the same time, when it comes to picking football polls, he is delusional, Paul. He does not need to have a pen and paper in his hand. Name me one Utah player going to be playing in the pros next year and get drafted. You can't. I can't even name you a Utah U football player off the top of my head. And I watch football religiously. I mean, it's just a stupid commentary to claim that Alabama ain't one of the 4 best teams in the country. Hell, they got 4 wide receivers that'll be first-round draft picks in the NFL. Many folks are projecting Alabama to have up to 10 players drafted in the first 2 rounds next year. Who in their right mind would look at Alabama and claim that Utah and Oklahoma is better than them? Hey, I give you credit though, Paul. You've been spitting it out there, brother. You've been promoting Alabama. You know why? Because you know football. And here's another thing that pisses me off about Brando and other media members in the media. And this is not a shot at you, but I'm so sick of hearing media members tell me they don't have a favorite team. I'm a neutral party in this. I don't have a favorite team. You telling me that you analyze football, you grew up and you didn't pull for a favorite team just because you signed a contract with some network or something now, you become a neutral party. I don't pull for LSU.
Legend. I got to go to a break here in a second, but you know me pretty well, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
We're human beings. Everybody's got prejudice. Everybody. I mean, I watch football every weekend, and I don't sit there and go, well, I just hope everybody has a good time. I'm rooting for the best story to me. I mean, I'm selfish.
Well, I tell you this.
I mean, you think I was rooting for Oregon the other night? Are you out of your mind?
Hell no, you weren't rooting for Oregon. I know you weren't
I was dressed as the Sun Devil mascot.
They might not have a favorite team, Paul, but I tell you one team. They have a team that they non-favorite to, and it's obvious with the Cadells and Brando.
Oh, yeah.
They hatred of Alabama is extreme and needs to stop.
Hey, I said that on Jocks Monday morning. I said everybody hates Alabama. There's Alabama bias all over the country, and I've been lambasted today by all the do-gooders in the national college football media. Legend, hate to run. We're up against the break. Back with much more. Before Wednesday, I want to get the week over with so we can get to Thanksgiving. Arthur is in San Francisco. Couldn't be any farther away from me if we tried. Good afternoon, Arthur.
Well, I could call from Dubai.
I'm glad you're here.
Paul, Paul, I was going to talk about the Iron Bowl, and we can get to that. But, Legend, he scared me. He said that he watches football religiously, and he can't name a single player on Utah, and therefore he knows they're not in the top 4. And then he was trying to tell me about projected draft picks, and that's supposed to tell me who the better team is. I mean, that's a scary road to go down. I think when it comes to the Iron Bowl,
maybe he just doesn't stay up that late.
Yeah, I know the bedtimes, and that's that's our commissioner Larry Scott's fault that he's putting these games on so late. I want to talk about this Iron Bowl. I actually think Alabama and Utah have very similar resumes when you look at it. Both teams blowing people out. They look really good, the eye test, both of them. I hate saying this, but I think this Iron Bowl, margin of victory, style points, is going to mean more than it ever did. I think if Alabama, with Mac Jones, is able to go out there and win impressively, it's going to show the committee how good this team is, and you won't say the two are comparable. If they win, as impressive as that would be in a small margin of victory, I think the committee is going to look at the two resumes and say they stack up pretty close to one another, and Utah has the conference championship, and Bama doesn't.
Listen, Arthur, I think part of your point is 100% correct. If Alabama puts a margin of victory on against Auburn that is significant, then I do think it's case closed. But I think, and maybe I'm too close to the Iron Bowl, having been to about 35 of them. I believe that winning at Auburn is very significant. Now, unless it's just a terrible game and you watch the game and go, neither team really impressed me very much, but I think that's unlikely. So Utah will have the 13th data point, the conference championship. By the way, that's assuming they win the conference championship, but I don't think they'll have anything else going for them.
Yeah, I agree with you that winning at Auburn, especially with a backup quarterback, no matter how you do it, it's impressive. I'm just saying the committee, I think they're going to see those two teams as comparable if that Iron Bowl is close, and Utah's going to get the slight edge when looking at the
But I would ask you, if Alabama's best win is over Auburn and Texas A&M and their loss is self-explanatory, what would you say Utah's best win would be? I mean, they lost at Southern Cal and they beaten Oregon, which, by the way, I don't think the Oregon win is that significant other than the fact that it was in a conference championship game.
Well, I think Oregon and Auburn beat Oregon, but those teams seem pretty similar to me. So the best wins would line up pretty closely. So that's where I see there. And I think what's hurting Bama is the SEC, 5 really good teams this year. I mean, top teams. The rest of it not very good. But Bama only played 2 of them.
And I will say Alabama will not have played 2 of the 4 best teams in the SEC, meaning Georgia and Florida, but they played everyone else. Hey, thanks for the call. We have another hour.
Obviously, huge week, Egg Bowl week, rivalry week. And know it's a game that means a ton to both schools, to the people of the state of Mississippi, to our players, to our coaches, to our fans. So, we can't wait to get on the field tonight and start preparations. Obviously, a lot of the kids have played against each other. We recruited a bunch of guys on their team. And, it's a game that's going to be played with great emotion, great passion, and, very excited to get to our second installation of it and make sure we're doing everything that we need to make sure that beautiful trophy stays put here in the Seal Building. It'll be a game where we honor our 26 seniors in their final game for the Maroon and White, guys who have done a ton over their careers to bring a lot of positive success to Mississippi State. So we'll make sure we send those guys out the right way. And it'll also be a game where we honor the teams from 1998 and 1999, 8-5 SEC West champs, and then the 10-2 team as well, led by the legendary Jackie Sherrill. So I think that'll be a great opportunity as well to pay respect to a couple of very, very impressive teams in Mississippi State history. Yeah, I mean, being a part of Pitt, Penn State, and growing up around Pitt, West Virginia, the backyard brawl, and you talk about 2 schools, with a lot in common and passionate fan bases, and I don't think you really quite understand it till you're in it. And I think leading up to the game, I got a pretty decent idea, but once the game started, and obviously, unfortunately, afterward, you kind of really got a true sense of what the rivalry means. Yeah, I think the kids are aware of it, and it's not something really that we even need to talk about. They know we're right on the cusp of bowl eligibility, and we got to win this one to get to the postseason. And I don't believe in feeling pressure. I believe in applying pressure. So they know that we need to have a great week of preparation. We'll start tonight on the field, and we got to do 2 things: make sure we play well and keep the egg here in Starkville. And if we do that, then we'll extend the season and get to play in the bowl game.
Welcome back. We're here in New York on this Tuesday night, Thanksgiving week. Seth Walder joined us earlier talking about Alabama's chances of getting in the college football playoff.
I still believe that Alabama could get in, and the playoff predictor definitely thinks Alabama could get in, even with a sort of close loss at Auburn.
I must tell you, I sat here and don't remember him saying that. Let's play it one more time.
I still believe that Alabama could get in, and the playoff predictor definitely thinks Alabama could get in, even with a sort of close loss at Auburn.
It shows you how well I pay attention to our own guests. I'm not sure I understand that, but I feel like an idiot not following up on that question. Stephen is up next in Virginia. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Paul, how are you doing today?
We are doing great. Thank you, Stephen.
Happy Thanksgiving week. I had
Thank
a
you.
question for you, but let me repeat it the third time. I believe Alabama will get in, and I heard somebody say that Utah has the better chance. If they played any games in the SEC, they would probably be the fourth or fifth team in the conference.
You're
and my
right.
real question is, Virginia Tech, I've been on all your show. I've not said anything bad. Virginia Tech's been playing good. They got a big game this week. And now I'm hearing rumors that Justin Fuente is linked to Arkansas. Is that even a good fit for him to go to Arkansas?
First of all, I really I haven't heard a lot about that. I mean, it really until about 6 weeks.
Today.
Well, listen, until about 6 weeks ago, many were wondering if Justin Fuente was a good fit for Virginia Tech, and now he's salvaged the season. I don't know what the connections are out there, unless he just is unhappy at Virginia Tech. But I don't know his. I mean, I think he's a good coach. But you tell me, what's the assessment of Fuente among the Hokie family?
He's been playing. We've been playing better. We've got 21 out of 22 players coming back next year. We're playing our Coastal Championship that we've not played in 2 or 3 years. And this is like one of the best seasons we've had record-wise since like 2005. So I was just wondering, I didn't know Arkansas was that much better because I've seen coaches go there and not succeed. And I'm not saying nothing bad about Arkansas, but I just think it's funny that everybody says he's on the hot seat. You know what I'm saying? And now he's a hot coach right now.
Well,
anyway,
listen, Steve. I don't know how hot he is. Would he work at Arkansas? Yes. He would work at Arkansas. Thank you for the call. I-Man is up next. Good afternoon, I-Man.
Good afternoon to you, Mr. New York City. Man, I like those pictures of you roaming around New York. You just fit right in. I mean, everybody in New York on the sidewalk's got a photographer and a videographer, right?
Let me say I spent a little time I spent a little time in Hollywood in August, and there are a few more people in Hollywood have photographers, but it works here.
Well, you kind of got the gist of it. I mean, you just look real natural, like you're not posing. I mean, them's regular vacation. Been there, done that trip pictures. And I was listening to you yesterday. Some people talking about, Bobby Petrino was at Arkansas, and of course the motorcycle thing he rode it out of town. And now they're talking about Hugh Freeze. I mean, you gonna be able to keep him off the damn telephone in Arkansas? You couldn't do it in Mississippi. Anyway. Now, Paul, I've been listening for a couple weeks now. When Alabama beats Auburn, we're gonna get in that game. We're gonna get in there. We're gonna get them. And that, I mean, what is it? Does the Bama fans realize they are Alabama? We are Bama. We Bama. We number one everywhere. You need style points. You need style points, Alabama. Neil Young had it right. Your Cadillac has got a wheel in the ditch and a wheel on the damn track, and you ain't going nowhere. You ain't going nowhere. You need style points, and you got to get past the Auburn Tigers to do it in Auburn playing football. And apparently y'all haven't been playing football this year because you need style points. And to listen to some of these airheads coming on here, I mean, the narrative is when Bama beats Auburn. What the hell happens, Paul, when Auburn beats that ass in Auburn on Saturday afternoon? And is the whole world going to hate Bama then because they ain't in the playoffs?
No, I tell you what's going to happen, I-Man. First call Monday. Ready?
First call Monday. It will be one hell of a show.
No, hey, I want you to play me for a second.
Sure. let's go to the phone lines, ladies and gentlemen. A big upset. Alabama's out of the playoffs, and maybe they get in. I don't know. Maybe they do something. Maybe some of these other teams puke on themselves and they get back in somehow. But let's go to the phones because it's going to be a great Monday. First call, Paul in New York City. How you doing, Paul?
Am I on?
What? Daniel, somebody, would you explain to these people? Listen, when you call in this show, turn the TV down and put the phone to your ear. Just forget everything else. Don't tell Mama I'm on TV. Here, have a beer. You know, put the phone down, ladies and gentlemen. Just listen to the phone. Just listen to the phone. Forget the TV. Paul, are you still there?
Hey there. How are you?
I'm for 2,000 times. I'm well. How are you?
Okay, good. What'd you think of the ball game?
Who the hell are you a fan of, Paul, from New York City? I mean, why'd you call here? Of all the people in the world
hey, hold on a second. I know we lost 31-3, but do you think we can still get in the playoff?
Of course. You know, Paul in New York City, of all the people in the world you could have called, hell, you could have called information before you called this program. Don't you ever call back in this show. But by the way, I'm gonna give you style points. You know, Paul, I mean, it's amazing. The world hates Alabama. Everybody hates them.
You just did a riff on what the old show when it was much better than it is now used to sound like.
It was great. Now, you don't think my next call is going to be that dumbass from Tuscaloosa Jim, do you? Because if he is, I'm quitting. War Damn Eagle, you have a great day, Paul Finebaum. In New York City.
My man gets call of the day right there. That was pretty good. Harry is in the Big Easy. Hello, Harry.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for squeezing me in today.
Thank you.
Paul, I'm going to tell you one thing the committee can't do. Committee can't stop us from going to Commanders during the playoffs. That's
we're there. I got an upstairs table already booked.
Well, I know where it is. Paul. I'll give you a little tip. The Chilean sea bass is going to be on the appetizer list when you get there.
I'm pretty hungry right now. I could dig in pretty tight on that.
Paul, I just wanted to wish you and yours and the Finebaum staff there a happy Thanksgiving, a safe holiday season. I'm enjoying the show, Paul.
Harry, thank you, and the same to your family, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
We'll do it, Paul. Take care.
Thank you, Harry. Harry and I've got a standing date at the national championship game. Doug is in South Carolina. Hello, Doug.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
We're doing great.
That's good. The Tiger Net, and you know I'm a Clemson fan, but I still watch and call you show. They had an article on the Tiger Net. The state paper down in Columbia had an article, and the way they worded it is don't ask. The state legislature said they will not buy out the $18.2 million Will Muschamp buyout.
So he's not even worth getting bought out. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I guess the legislature don't feel so. I don't know. Let me say something about the Iron Bowl. What the Iron Bowl is going to come down to, and we can talk quarterbacks and receivers and all that all day long, but what's really going to come down to is can Alabama's good but not prolific offensive line like they've had in recent years, but they're still good, stop Auburn's terrific front seven from sitting Jones on his butt. If they can't stop him from sitting him on his butt, then he's going to hit those receivers, and Bama's got second to none receivers, and it's game over. It's that simple.
Yeah, you're right. That's the one thing we have not talked about that, and this is not a legendary or memorable offensive line, but if they're good enough, that's all Mac Jones needs. I mean, he's a serviceable quarterback. He may be even better than that. We'll take a break. We are not done with our guests yet. We'll head to Kentucky here in a couple of minutes, and more of your phone calls at 242-7285. Back with much.
We're proud to be playing this game at Kroger Field here this weekend and trying to keep this cup here with us. So big game this week. We're excited about the opportunity. Very proud of the way our team played this past week. And, rivalry week is here, and need to continue that and play a very good game here this week. Coach Satterfield and their staff has done a remarkable job this year. This team's playing hard. They're playing good. So we have to be ready for a big game. He's one of those guys. There's no question. Each year, last year he had surgeries and had to take care of his body in the off season. It took him a long time to get healthy. This year, as the year goes on, same thing. He has some ups and some downs and gives it everything he's got. And I'm really proud of Cash and what he's done and overcoming some adversity and things that maybe not everybody knows about. And, each individual is different and goes through some ups and downs and has a lot of, trials and tribulations and things going on in their personal life, in their own life, and in their families that are just very hard. But the young man gives us everything he's got all the time. We love him. He's a great teammate, and he's ready to go. He'll be back out there ready to go this week. So proud of him and the things he's had to overcome.
Mark, I looked this morning in the National Weather Service says there's a 70% chance of rain.
Wow.
Do you guys just expect it to rain now?
It's just, it's been strange. We've won each game, I think, haven't we?
2-1.
2-1. Georgia, that's right. Yep. It is what it is, so I think everybody knows we're going to throw the ball 50 times. So that may hurt a little bit.
We appreciate your clarification of the Florida State situation the other night. Personally, I would think your phone would be ringing off the hook. Have you talked to any other programs?
No, I don't want to get into any specifics about anything like that, and I don't want to open up, speculation and things for the future. I just don't think it's appropriate. I was pretty clear on, I'm really intent on being here and building this program, and we have unfinished business, and I'm excited about the future. So that was pretty clear.
Yeah, I know you don't pay attention to social media, but at least this week the fan base does want you to stay here. So.
Well, that's it. I appreciate that. Thank you. Keep me updated.
Welcome back. We are glad to have you on, and there's so many important rivalry games this weekend, including Kentucky and Louisville. Louisville is a team that has surprised many people. Kentucky has had some ups and downs, of course, especially at the quarterback position when so many injuries occurred to the 1 and 2. And here comes Lynn Bowden to save the day, the speedy wide receiver, taking on additional responsibilities and has been quite good. Thank you. Lynn joins us now. Thanks for coming back. I find your story to be one of the most amazing of the year, and I know you don't want to get hung up on what you've accomplished. You've just your next man up. But talk about your odyssey this year as the quarterback of the Wildcats.
I appreciate you guys for having me back on. This year it's just we had a lot of ups and downs. We were really just searching for our identity. How we was going to define ourselves and. I'm the type of guy I want to step in and do what's best for the team, and I think the team bought into that, and we just never looked back from there.
Lynn, listen, it's not easy being a student athlete. It's especially difficult when you have a tricky position like wide receiver. But how much more have you had to study and work and look at film now that you are the team's quarterback?
I had to dedicate most of my day to learning the different things. It's way different from high school to college. High school, my line, we went big on big. So when I first got in there, I had to learn Rip and Liz, Lester Ralph, the protections just from the line standpoint and where I'm hot off of. So I had to spend most of my days in there with Coach Henshaw.
So when you were a high school quarterback, obviously I'm not saying anything about the high school game. It's different, but what type of offense were you running? It
was a majority spread offense. Sometimes we would get under center, but for the most part, we was in the gun. 10 personnel, really no tight ends, and it's either shots or the read option.
So when you're running this offense now, obviously done pretty well. What's the biggest challenge as you trot out there and take a good look around not only your own personnel but the defense's personnel?
The defense can, they can disguise different things, but one thing I was always taught, especially by Coach Henshaw this year, the corners can lie to you, but the safeties don't. So if I read the safeties right, then I should be good. And the corners, they can mess with you. They can mess with your head. Show one coverage and then end up coming on the blitz or something. So I just got to be ready for everything.
Well, certainly the big game against Louisville. I don't know if it's allowable to ask you about someone who is connected to the Louisville program, but I think everyone is cheering today for Lamar Jackson after what he did last night. Did you happen to catch any of the game?
I watched the game. I actually, this is probably the first game I watched the full game in the NFL this year. I watched it because I just wanted to see his demeanor, and how he really played. I witnessed it live in action my freshman year when they came here and played us, and I just wanted to pick up a few pointer tips off of him last night, and I think I did. And to me, I think he's going to win the MVP race and take his team to the Super Bowl.
I'm interested in this, and I'm kind of cheating here because I'm up here at ESPN, and everyone's asking me, of all people, about Lamar Jackson today, and because I did see him in college, and you played against him. How would you describe, if you don't mind, Lynn, what you saw in that final game a couple of years ago versus, and you guys won that game, I believe.
No, we ended up losing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, okay, maybe I was trying to give you a win you didn't have. But what you saw in that game as a player versus what you saw last night against the Rams?
It was very similar. I think he elevated his game as he got to the league. Here he was a game changer. He took over the game, and it was just that. I really don't know how else to explain him. He's just a game changer, sort of like myself, and he really just he ran away with the game himself.
Lynn, I know some of these questions are not easy because there's a lot of speculation. There was even an article this week up in Lexington about whether you would want to play quarterback next year. I think you put that one to bed pretty quickly, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I'm just doing what's best for the team.
You're smart. What about your own future? I mean, is that something you just contemplate when the season's over and you have a chance to catch your breath, which you certainly don't have right now?
Yeah, I think that's a decision. I'd have to make after the season. After the season is done, maybe after this week, I could sit down with my mom, and just talk to my immediate family and look at the different options and just go from there. Right now, I'm just focused on winning this last game and getting us to the best bowl game that we can have.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about another thing before you go. I think I asked you about Lamar, which I think everybody is talking about him today. But last week, and we'll continue talking about Tua Tagovailoa. I understand you sent some warm wishes to him as a fellow quarterback in the SEC. Would it be too much to ask you to share some of those thoughts and how you conveyed them to him?
I mean, he just wanted to perfect something, sort of like myself. Every day at practice, if I don't like something or I feel like we didn't work to perfect it, I asked Coach if we could do it again, and I think he wanted to just take that moment to be perfect, and no one wants to be hurt, and it was just a tragedy thing for him to go down like that, and I just wish him well. I think his surgery went well, and one quarterback to another, I just hope for a speedy recovery.
I'm always intrigued, Lynn, because we get an opportunity to talk to various quarterbacks at schools, and fans who are watching right now or listening. I mean, they take this stuff very seriously. Certainly, you do as well. But describe to the audience the fraternity of quarterbacks, because I know you've seen these guys in high school. Now I realize you started a quarterback in high school, but but you're an SEC starting quarterback right now, even though you may go back to wide receiver. What's it like, and how much communication is there among this brotherhood?
For me, I'm a vocal leader, and I think my relationship with the whole team, I feel like I can express myself to them guys without it being a problem, and they know they can express themselves to me. So that just goes a long way. Like everyone would say, communication is key, and that's the honest truth to the game of football, and that's the only way to be successful.
When you have a chance after Saturday to reflect, and I don't think some people understand how pressing your assignments are. I realize this is a different kind of week because of the holiday, but what do you think you're going to take away from what has to be one of the most extraordinary years of your life, starting it as a wide receiver and watching two of your teammates go down and you having to adjust, and not only adjusting, in many ways carrying this team on your back, even though I know you're not going to admit that, but a lot of people see it that way. What do you think your takeaway will be from the 19 season?
See, I'm the type of guy I don't really like to talk about myself, but I mean, if you must know, I just, about me, I found out about myself that I got a lot of heart, just within, and I'm very passionate about everything I do. I'm a winner. I hate to lose. I love to win, and I just love the game. So like, I just want people to understand, like, it's bigger than me. Like, that's why I stepped up to the road for this team. I wanted to be the best I can and be in the best situation that we can be in at the University of Kentucky, and I think that's just the way it was.
Well, Lynn, thanks for coming on. You've been with us a couple of times, and we have certainly enjoyed it. All the best this weekend against Louisville, and especially with the rest of your career. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks, Lynn.
I appreciate it. You too, and go Big Blue.
You got it. Great to have one of our favorite players on, Lynn Bowden, who has just taken on quite a bit this year and been very successful in his endeavors. We'll take a break. 30 minutes to go. More of your phone calls after this.
Well, everyone's worried about LSU, to be honest. And it is actually interesting that the focus just goes completely past Georgia Tech, not just because it's a rivalry game, not just because it's on the road, but because with Georgia's offensive troubles, if Georgia doesn't fix those offensive troubles, the game could be close for a while. But ultimately, Georgia Tech's 3-8, so people are looking to LSU. And, I sense some optimism just talking to people like fans and, maybe some fellow media members. I have a podcast with former Georgia All-American linebacker Rennie Curran, and he's pretty optimistic about Georgia's chances. And that's despite actually losing total yardage to Texas A&M on Saturday, and not the first time that Georgia's won despite being beat in total yardage, and not dominating an opponent. It just kind of comes down to matchups, and people think that they have an elite defense here and that they can hold LSU's elite offense in check. The conditions weren't great last Saturday night, but he still missed open receivers more than I've seen him ever miss somebody who's open. And Texas A&M's quarterback, Kellen Mond, didn't have as much trouble throwing the ball in similar conditions. The good news for Georgia, there will be no such elements in the SEC championship or any playoff game they would play after that. But it's not something that's been limited to rain-soaked games. It's something that they've got to figure out. And, Paul, if I were looking at Georgia, especially with this offense and Jake Fromm, just within the context of this 2019 season, just what they've done this year, if I didn't know anything about this team or Jake Fromm prior to this season, I would say they don't have a chance against LSU. If you beat LSU, you get in. It's the same situation they've been in, Paul, the last 2 years, 2017, 2018. They came in to the SEC championship with one loss, knowing they just get in and they win. Last year, they made the argument for getting in even though they lost. I don't think that they'll be able to make that argument this time, especially if Alabama wins at Auburn. But it's pretty simple for them, and It's why the last 3 or 4 weeks, when the playoff rankings have come out and there's been all the debate over playoff scenarios, the reaction around here has been kind of muted because everyone kind of realized Georgia's situation was pretty straightforward.
We're back, and glad you're here. And more phone calls as we continue here on a early Tuesday evening. But first, let's look at Fansville, brought to you by Dr. Pepper. Pretty good weekend in college football. You have A&M at LSU. LSU looking pretty strong there. Clemson, South Carolina. Georgia, Georgia Tech. Does that surprise anyone? Alabama, 66% chance of winning according to FPI. Let's get back to your calls. And Carter is in North Carolina. Hello, Carter.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
You sound a whole lot better today than you did yesterday.
Well, thank you. I really feel pretty good. I just still sound like I woke up.
Great. Paul, I heard a rumor, you verified. Is Alabama scheduling the Bulldogs next year?
Yeah, Georgia is at Alabama next year.
They are playing next year.
Yes, they are.
That's great. Okay, I got a scenario run by you. First of all, I'm a War Eagle. Okay, we played Oregon, Florida, LSU, Georgia. We're going to play Alabama. That's 5 teams out of the top 10. And, of course, Alabama only played 1 out of the top 10. We lost 3, the Florida, LSU, and the Georgia. My question to you, Paul, if Florida, LSU, and Georgia were to be replaced with teams such as Duke, Western Carolina, and Southern Georgia, what would the fans for Alabama say about us?
Well, listen, you make a really good point. I think Auburn.
We would be going into the ball game this weekend 11-0.
You're probably right.
And then we'd be up there in one of the squares. I think it's a good point.
I think it's a great point, and I, not only did Auburn have to play all of these teams, but they played 2 top 10 teams on the road. One at a neutral site, and obviously the Georgia game at home. It's, the only school that can complain even louder is Texas A&M, which plays at the number 1 team. They played at the number 1 team early in the year in Clemson, and they played the number 1 team in Alabama at their place.
And, Paul, I believe they're going to be a great team in a year or 2 from now.
No, I think you're right. But
really
Auburn is. We knew the Auburn schedule would be difficult. I frankly think Auburn did okay. I thought there were 2 games Auburn could have lost in addition to the ones you mentioned, Oregon and Texas A&M, and they handled both of those games.
And the LSU was 23-20.
Yeah, it was a close game. Auburn made it very, very tight at the end. And listen, nobody has held LSU to what Auburn did, 23 points.
Right. Yeah.
That's the first 5 minutes for most LSU games.
Right, that's true. Okay.
Well, glad to hear from you. Thank you very, very much. Let's continue. And Glenn is up next. Hey, Glenn.
Hey, Paul. Good evening to you.
Thank you.
I'm going to change the subject here, and I'm asking really your opinion, and this has to do with Urban Meyers. Last week, after the Ohio State-Penn State game, the commentators asked him who would get his vote for the Heisman. Now, most of the talk at that time, before they asked him that question, was on Chase Young. And his reply back was that if Chase Young had the same game with Michigan that he just had with Penn State, that you couldn't help but to vote for Chase Young over Joe Burrow. The reason why I'm bringing that up is I want your opinion that where did Joe Burrow come from? Well, he came from Ohio State. Who was the coach at Ohio State? Urban Myers. And I guess if I was the coach that let go maybe a possible Heisman Trophy winner, that I may be endorsing Chase over Burrow too. But I guess my comment about this is that Urban Myers is highly thought of as a coach, yet the year he won the national championship at Ohio State, he did it using his third-string quarterback. And everyone thought he was a genius because he won a national championship with a third-string quarterback. So my comment is, where do you draw the line as far as the ability to judge players, in that maybe Cardale Jones was really the first-string quarterback but had him as the third-string quarterback, and they won the national championship. Obviously, Joe Burrows was the second and third-string quarterback with Urban Myers and decided, hey, I know I can do better than this, and left. And one last thought was the year he was under suspension at Ohio State, the committee that was trying to decide his fate that day, it took them anywhere from, I think, 10 to 12 hours to decide his fate. But the rumor was that the reason why it took so long was that they wanted a public apology from him over the whole situation, and that initially he said he was not going to apologize. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you give me your opinion on Urban Myers.
Well, listen, I think you're right about the latter part. The first part is interesting. I have seen, and we've all seen, situations where you bring in a backup and he outperforms the starter. I don't know how that happens, but I am going to give Urban Meyer the benefit of the doubt. I think he's a really good coach. I mean, I don't think he's much of a human being, but I've already had plenty to say about that in the past. But, yeah, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, do we want to ask Kirby Smart? Would would Georgia be farther along this year, or maybe in a couple of weeks if they don't beat LSU, if he had Justin Fields over Jake Fromm?
Here's my reply to that. These coaches make a lot of money each year, and they make a lot of money to make these decisions of who's the best player to play. My comment is, I think Urban Myers, the last couple of years before he left Ohio State, really got it wrong.
Well, he may have. He absolutely may have. So, listen, you brought up some really interesting points, Glenn. Thank you for the call. We're up against a break. We are back with much, much more, and your phone calls. The hour. Will they leave Alabama out? I think they're just going to leave Alabama out of the poll tonight. Don't you think, Larry?
Oh, man. You know what, Paul? My hopes, I don't look for anything good for happening to us because we don't deserve it. Our defense is, man, it's terrible. I mean, I hate to admit that, but we had injuries. I'm not going to go back.
Hey, by the way,
that.
LSU's defense is not exactly stellar either.
No, they're not jumping up and down, Paul. I think Auburn could have beat them, but these people hollering, we going into Auburn, man, they say, oh, y'all 66% chance to beat them. No, don't say that. Don't say that.
Hey, Larry, you get your brains beat out at home, and you lost all your swag, man.
Oh, I'm depressed. I'm a depressed puppy. I'm telling you.
Can you imagine, Larry? What's worse? Losing to Auburn or going back or going to the playoffs and losing to LSU again?
I don't know. I thought, that's losing to Auburn would be worse. If we can
that would be pretty
Auburn,
bad.
Yeah, losing to Auburn is just listen to our man's yakadoo running them flappers. He gets on them left-handed doobie-doo-wows and gets in his little speeches. You know how he is. He gets on my nerves, man. But I'm telling you, Paul, I want everybody to have a happy Thanksgiving out there, man. And and I appreciate you taking my call, Finebaum.
Well, Larry, you have a happy, a healthy, and a great day.
Yeah.
Don't eat, Larry. Try to keep your Thanksgiving meal under 10,000 calories. Okay.
My beer, I don't think that's that many calories in a beer. I don't know.
Well, no. I mean, you only got to. You drink Bud Light, don't you?
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's only about.
Watch you wait. Yeah.
There's only about 100 calories. So if you drink.
Right.
I mean, but I mean, I read something today about killed me. It talked about the turkey, the dressing, the pumpkin pie, the cranberries.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a $3,000 or $4,000 calorie meal. I haven't had 3,000 or 4,000 calories all week.
You can tell you ain't, man. Every time you eat something, you can watch it go down. Hi, brother. We love you, man. Roll down tight.
Oh, man. Now you've ruined my holiday. Mike is in Pennsylvania. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how you doing? Just to go off something with
Hey, Mike, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Mike did not answer the bell. How about Rob is up next? Hey, Rob.
Hey, Paul. How you doing this evening? You there?
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, okay. Didn't hear your feedback. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, we apparently had a little glitch there, but glad you made it.
Yeah, okay, cool. Hey, first off, I want to wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much. Same to you guys.
Thank you. Couple things. One is I'm going to eat a little crow before turkey this week. I think you and I had the conversation. We both were concerned about the whole Jeremy Banks situation and how Pruitt handled that. And
right. We sure were.
Yeah, we were. And, you know, I just want to go back and eat this little crow here, and I just got to give Jeremy Pruitt credit. And I've heard a lot of your callers calling about this. And you know what? The guy is just old school coach. He is doing it. We may not politically correct like it. We may not like some of his old adages, the way he's doing things. But we've got to give credit where credit's due, you know. And I'm going to give him credit. I don't think that Garantano was so great this last Saturday. I think he left Palmer out to dry a couple times, but I think our receivers did an outstanding job addressing that. And just one little tidbit here, and I'll let you go. You know, it's funny, you know, they had three 100-yard receivers. And the last time that Tennessee's had three 100-yard anything, it was back in 1990. You may remember this, Paul. The Vanderbilt game with James Stewart and Aaron Hay and those guys had three 100-yard rushers.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
Kind of a unique kind of stat, yeah. But I just wanted to come in and just say, eat a little crow and say, you know what, I'm going to take it back. I still don't agree with how he handled the Banks situation, but let's give credit where credit is due. I mean, they went out against Vandy this Saturday. They're going to go 7-5, and I don't think anybody thought that was going to happen. So,
no, Rob, you could not have gotten that bet in Las Vegas after the BYU game, and you know, I thought I kind of threw something up on Sunday morning. Ogeron's going to win not only SEC Coach of the Year but National Coach of the Year. But I mean, Jeremy Pruitt will get some votes, and he should. He's had an amazing year considering where. I mean, again, he coached them. You know, he was the coach the first two games too. Let's not lose sight of that. Dakota is in Arkansas. Hello, Dakota.
Hi.
Hey there.
All right. I wanted to ask who you thought Arkansas's next coach was going to be, and if you thought potentially Lane Kiffin would be an option for the Razorbacks.
Listen, I like Lane a lot. I think he's going to make somebody a really great head coach. I don't see him going to Arkansas though.
Okay, well, you know, that's a name that's been dropped in Arkansas head coaching circles quite a bit. So if you were a betting man, Paul, who would you think would come to Arkansas?
Well, listen, I mean, you can't have the conversation without Malzahn, and I don't have any idea what Malzahn wants to do or what he will do, but Saturday afternoon I think we'll have a better indicator. I don't know any more than you do, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. In this case, I've heard the exact same names. What other names are you focused on?
Specifically, Mike Norvell and Mike Leach was two names.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard Norvell's name more than any other name. Leach, to me, would be a surprise. I personally like Leach, and he's a tremendous X's and O's coach. He is colorful. Now, it really depends on whether the university is comfortable with him. He's an outlier, I'll tell you that. I know Mike pretty well. Sky is up next. Hey, Sky.
Hey, Paul. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family and everyone
Thank you.
listening. I know you're short on time, about to end the show, so I appreciate you taking my call. But I wanted to just touch on a couple of things, if you'll indulge me. First, I think most everyone would agree that Tua Tagovailoa is one of the greatest players and arguably the best quarterback in Alabama history. And going into the season and even in the middle of the season, Alabama's strength was their offense and their weakness was their defense. And now all of a sudden you're going to take one of the best players and arguably the best quarterback away from that team, and yet you still have Bama fans claiming that they're one of the best 4 teams in the country.
Well, you know what? We don't know. I mean, I think you have to look at the sum of all total, and tonight we'll find out in about 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure Alabama stays where they are. Now, does that mean the committee has factored in Mac Jones? I mean, one thing. Remember, when you're on this committee, you know next week takes care of everything. So you're not taking a big risk putting Alabama number 5. You know if they lose, they're out, and if they're in, they'll probably move up if Georgia loses the game. So it's really that simple. Okay, well, we're done for the night. We hope you'll be with us tomorrow. We're here all day, and of course, we'll be on Friday. We won't be here Thursday, but that's the only day all week. So let's see what happens here in a couple of minutes. If there are any changes or it's status quo, we'll talk about it tomorrow. If we miss you tomorrow, if you're out traveling or driving somewhere, we hope all of you have a very wonderful. And we're off and running on a Tuesday, and it's beginning to look a lot like Thanksgiving. I think it's a healthy debate whether Alabama should be ranked ahead of Georgia.
First of all, why were you discussing college football with Stephen A. Smith? Okay,
that's a good question. I mean, you never see me from the waist down, but I'm locked in here. I'm not. If I dare criticize someone like that, I can't get out of here.
I don't really see how you could say that Alabama is out of this thing.
Is it just about Alabama winning this game?
I certainly think that a blowout loss would help their case, but I still believe that Alabama could get in, and the playoff predictor definitely thinks Alabama could get in, even with a sort of close loss at Auburn.
We live in a hot take universe, Mike, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person. I have buried and given Jim Harbaugh last rites about 10 times, and I'll do it again Saturday if they lose. The Ohio State-Michigan game really doesn't matter, especially if Ohio State loses. Was I right in making that point?
You were right, as long as Ohio State doesn't lose to Michigan and then lose again.
You got to admit the biggest fear I've got is the odds are in Michigan's favor. They're due, if nothing else. I mean, you could only beat the same team how many straight times? You know what I'm saying?
Pat Dooley, are you not buying the resurgence of Tennessee football? I mean, come on.
Well, look, I used to call them the Kardashians, right? Because they looked good, but they never did anything. Then I started calling them Uncle Rico because they always want to go back to the past. They're always out in the field throwing the ball again, for the camera.
I don't know what these media members are drinking, but it's definitely spiked with haterade.
I don't think anybody realistically thinks the SEC's going to get 3.
Well, that's why I don't know why Bama fans are all bent out of shape about comparing their resume to Utah.
They're just doing it to do it. I mean, listen, what else are they going to do right now?
I guess not make travel plans to Atlanta. That's for darn sure.